She built a company from nothing and lost it in a single afternoon. Olivia Hart once signed contracts worth millions. She once walked into boardrooms where men twice her age stood up when she entered. She once had a corner office on the 42nd floor with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking a city she believed she owned. Then one Tuesday, at 30 years old, she found herself standing in the rain outside a roadside diner, broke, invisible, and too proud to cry. What happened next, nobody could have scripted. Drop a comment with your city. Let's see how far this story travels. Like and follow so you don't miss what comes next. The rain had been falling since morning. Not the dramatic kind that comes in walls and sheets and makes people run, just the stubborn, grinding kind that soaks through everything slowly, the kind that doesn't announce itself and doesn't apologize, the kind that just keeps coming, indifferent to whether you have an umbrella or not. Olivia Hart had been walking in it for 23 minutes. She knew the exact number because she had checked her phone at the corner of Marsh and 5th when she left the parking garage where her car now sat, keys in the ignition, gas tank sitting just above empty, and a bright orange sticker on the windshield from a towing company that had already flagged the spot as delinquent. She hadn't moved the car in 4 days. She hadn't had the energy to figure out where to move it to. The phone told her it was 2:47 in the afternoon. It also told her she had 3 unread messages, 2 of them from her mother, one from a number she didn't recognize and had no intention of answering. It did not tell her what she was supposed to do with the rest of her day, or the rest of her life, or the next 10 minutes. The phone was significantly less helpful on questions like those. She had pulled her jacket tighter and kept walking. Hollow Creek was the kind of town that existed in the spaces between places, not quite a suburb, not quite rural, just a strip of gas stations and hardware stores and family-owned restaurants strung along Route 9 like lights someone had half-heartedly draped across a fence. Olivia had driven through towns like this 100 times in her old life, barely registering them, eyes fixed on whatever highway stretched ahead. She had never imagined stopping in one. She had certainly never imagined it becoming the place where she bottomed out. But here she was. The diner appeared on her left like something out of an old photograph. Chrome trim around the windows, a hand-painted sign that read, "Patties" in red letters, one of the P's slightly faded from years of weather. A neon open sign blinked weakly in the window. Through the glass she could see booth seating, a long counter with round stools, and the kind of warm yellow light that looked from the outside like something you could actually sit inside and disappear into. She pushed the door open. The bell above it rang once. Inside smelled like coffee and bacon grease and something sweet. Pie, probably, though she couldn't see it from where she stood. The warmth hit her immediately, the kind that makes cold fingers sting back to life, and for one embarrassing second she felt her throat tighten. She swallowed it down. She was getting better at that. The diner was maybe half full. A man in a work jacket sat at the counter, both hands wrapped around a mug, not looking at anything. 2 women in a corner booth were talking over half-eaten plates of food, their voices low and steady. A teenage boy in a Patty's apron was refilling a napkin dispenser near the far wall with the focused expression of someone who had been told to do it twice already. Nobody looked up when she walked in. That used to bother her, the being ignored. There had been years of her life when she had walked into rooms and people had looked up. Not because she demanded it, but because she had cultivated a particular kind of presence, the kind you build over time through late nights and hard decisions, and learning to hold eye contact a half-second longer than feels comfortable. She had worked for that look. She had earned it. Now, wearing a rain-dampened jacket over clothes she'd washed in a bathroom sink 2 days ago, her hair pulled back in a way that was less intentional style and more survival practicality. She was grateful for the invisibility. A waitress appeared from behind the counter. Mid-40s, ponytail, comfortable shoes, the kind of face that had probably been kind since birth and had only gotten more so with age. Her name tag said Gloria. "Anywhere you like, hun," she said, already moving back toward the coffee station. "I'll be right with you." Olivia chose a booth near the window, not the corner. She didn't want to look like she was hiding, but not the center either. She sat down, put her bag on the seat beside her, and pressed her cold hands flat against the table. The laminate was warm from where the afternoon light had been hitting it through the glass. She hadn't expected that. She sat with her hands there for a moment, just feeling it. Mchab. Gloria came back with a menu and a glass of water without being asked. She set both down without ceremony, topped off someone's coffee at the next table, and glanced back. "Ready, or you need a minute?" "A minute," Olivia said. She already knew she was going to order the cheapest thing on the menu. She had gotten very efficient at scanning menus for the cheapest thing. It had become a reflex, eyes moving from right to left, prices first, descriptions second. The grilled cheese was $4.50. The soup of the day was $3.75. There was a half sandwich and cup of soup combo for $6.25 that she genuinely wanted, the kind of wanting that was embarrassing in its specificity, her body just tired of making do. But she had done the math on her phone while she was walking, which meant she had done it in the rain while her fingers were going numb, which should tell you something about the state of things. After the 2 pending charges she knew were sitting against her account, and the one she suspected but couldn't confirm, she had somewhere between $12 and $18 available. Maybe. She ordered the half sandwich, turkey on wheat, because it was the cheapest protein option, and a coffee because she needed something hot to hold, and because $1.75 felt justifiable in a way that was hard to explain, but had something to do with dignity. Gloria wrote it down without looking up. "Anything else?" "No, thank you. That's everything." While she waited, Olivia sat with her hands around the coffee mug Gloria had brought without being asked, which was its own small mercy, and looked out the rain-streaked window at Route 9. A truck went by, then a pickup, then a minivan with a cracked rear bumper and a parking sticker from an elementary school. She tried to remember the last time she had sat somewhere without a phone in her hand or a laptop in front of her, or a meeting in 20 minutes. It took her a while. Somewhere around 2019, maybe. Before the second funding round. Before the pivot. Before Marcus. She closed her eyes briefly. Marcus Hale had been her co-founder, her business partner of 6 years, the person who had sat across from her in her first apartment on a folding card table at 2 a.m, eating cold pizza and drawing org charts on the backs of envelopes, talking about what Heartbridge could become. She had trusted him with everything. She had trusted him, as it turned out, with too much. The details were still tangled in the kind of legal language that turns human betrayal into abstract procedure, breach of fiduciary duty, unauthorized restructuring, dilution of founder shares through a series of board votes she hadn't been informed of in advance. Her lawyers had explained it to her in a conference room with a view of Lake Michigan, and she had sat there nodding while something inside her quietly fell apart. The short version. Marcus had wanted to take the company in a direction she didn't agree with. And rather than having that conversation, rather than fighting it out the way they had fought out 100 other disagreements over 6 years, he had maneuvered the board, brought in investors with different priorities, and by the time the dust settled, Olivia had technically resigned, though the resignation letter had been drafted for her, and the choice had been largely theoretical. 3 months ago. She had sat across from a lawyer in a conference room on a Tuesday afternoon, signed her name in 4 places, and walked out of the building she had founded in a haze that hadn't entirely lifted since. She'd lost the company. She'd lost her income, her title, the apartment she'd been subletting at a company-related discount, the professional network that had quietly, efficiently, diplomatically unnetworked itself in the weeks that followed, because that is what professional networks do when the center of gravity shifts. She still had her pride, technically, but it had gotten very light lately. What, turkey on wheat? Gloria set the plate down carefully. Half a sandwich cut diagonally, with a small handful of chips on the side that Olivia hadn't ordered, and suspected were an unofficial addition. "Thank you," she said. "Sure thing." She ate slowly because she had learned that eating slowly made things feel less desperate, and because the sandwich was actually good, thick bread, real turkey, not the processed kind, and a smear of Dijon that she hadn't asked for, but that was exactly right. She was thinking about this, about how a sandwich could be the best thing you'd eaten in 3 days without that being a commentary on the sandwich, when the realization hit her. She reached into her bag, then the other pocket, then checked her jacket. She knew before she finished checking. She had that particular hollow certainty you get when the math that you were doing in your head while walking in the rain was wrong, when the number you thought was in your account was not the number that was actually there, because the pending charge from the gas station 2 days ago had cleared this morning, which she had forgotten, which she should not have forgotten, which she had anyway. She had $7.43. The sandwich was $5.50 with tax. The coffee was $1.75 plus tax. She did the arithmetic 3 times in the space of about 4 seconds, and the answer was the same each time. She couldn't cover both. She sat very still for a moment. The diner went on around her. The clink of cutlery, the low murmur of conversation, the radio behind the counter playing something old and soft. Nobody was looking at her. She was still invisible. She took a breath. Then she flagged down Gloria, who was passing with a coffee pot, and asked her to come closer. "I need to talk to you for a second," Olivia said quietly, "about the check." She kept her voice low and her eyes on the table more than she wanted to. She explained the situation plainly. She had come in expecting to have enough, she'd miscalculated. She had enough to cover one item and not both. She was sorry for the inconvenience. She could leave the sandwich mostly eaten if that was easier. She would leave a note with her information and come back with the difference. She had the whole thing prepared. She had rehearsed it, slightly, while she was checking her pockets. This was a thing she had learned to do, prepare the exit with as much dignity as possible before beginning it. Gloria listened with her head tilted slightly to one side, the coffee pot held at her side, and her expression doing something complicated that Olivia didn't entirely want to read. "Hun, I'm not asking for charity," Olivia said. She kept her voice even. "I just want to be upfront about the situation and figure out the right thing to do." "I know you're not," Gloria said. I can leave something. My name? A number? Give me 1 second." Gloria moved away. Not hurrying, just walking, toward the counter. Olivia watched her lean down, open something under the register, and for one mortifying moment she thought Gloria was going to pull out some kind of manager's protocol binder. Because of course there was a policy, of course there was a process, of course this happened enough at a roadside diner on Route 9 that they had developed procedures for it. She looked back at her plate. The sandwich was still there, slightly less perfect than it had been, the Dijon drying a little at the edges. She picked up the cup of coffee and held it with both hands and stared at the window and thought, 30 years old. You are 30 years old and you are negotiating over a $5 sandwich. She didn't let herself finish the thought. She almost missed him. She was still looking at the window when there was a small movement in her peripheral vision. Not Gloria, someone else, coming from the booth diagonally across from hers. She turned, and there was a man standing at the edge of her table, not close, giving her space, the way people do when they're trying not to startle you. He was maybe 30, early 30s, brown hair that needed a cut, the kind of face that had probably looked younger a few years ago and was now settling into something more angular. He wore a green work jacket with a logo she couldn't quite read and the expression of someone choosing his words carefully. "Sorry," he said. "I wasn't trying to listen. The diner's pretty small." Olivia looked at him. "It's okay," she said, "because what else do you say?" "Can I—" He paused. Then, "I already took care of it. Up front. The sandwich and the coffee both." She stared at him. "You didn't have to do that." "I know." He shrugged, and it was the most unself-conscious shrug she had seen in a long time. Not performed, not waiting to be told he was a good person. Just a shrug. "I wanted to." "I don't know you," she said. She wasn't being rude, it just seemed like a relevant fact. "No," he agreed. "You don't." A beat. "My name's Ethan," he said. "Ethan Walker." He didn't sit down without being invited. He stood there with his jacket on and his hands in his pockets and waited. And Olivia, who had built a company partly on her ability to read people, who had gotten very good at telling the difference between generosity and the performance of generosity, looked at him for a moment and then gestured toward the seat across from her. "Sit down if you want," she said. "You don't have to." "I've got a few minutes," he said. He sat, but at the edge of the booth, clearly prepared to leave quickly if that's what she wanted. I didn't want to throw money at you and walk out. That seemed weird." "It is a little weird," she admitted. Something in him relaxed very slightly. "Yeah? Thank you," she said, sincerely. You're welcome. He said it simply, without the particular inflection people use when they want to be thanked again for having been thanked. She wrapped both hands around her coffee cup again. The warmth was starting to feel less like a mercy and more just like warmth, which was its own small progress. Do you do that a lot? She asked. He thought about it. Not a lot. Sometimes. I've been in spots where I needed somebody to do something small, and nobody did. Makes you pay attention more, I guess. She looked at him. What kind of spots? He considered whether to answer. She could see him deciding. Single dad, he said finally. Daughter's 6. There were a couple years there where the math was real tight. Is it better now? Better than it was. He said it without drama, just reporting. I work for a local supply company, Millbrook Industrial. It's a good job, steady, good people. He paused. It pays okay. It's getting better. She nodded. What about you? He asked. And then immediately, you don't have to answer that. I'm not asking because I paid for lunch. I'm just making conversation. I know, she said. And she did know. That was the strange thing. She could tell. I'm sort of between things right now. Yeah, he said. That happens. He said it like it was a fact and not a judgment, and she appreciated that more than she had words for in that particular moment. They talked for 11 minutes. She knew because she checked her phone when he stood up to go. It was not a transformative conversation, not in the way people describe things afterward when they've decided something was important. It was just two people in a diner during a rainstorm talking at the outer edge of honesty, where you're more truthful than you mean to be and less guarded than you've trained yourself to be, because the setting demands it and you're too tired for the alternative. She told him she'd worked in tech. He didn't push for details. He told her about his daughter, Lily, who was apparently in the middle of a phase where she refused to eat anything that wasn't either orange or beige. She laughed at that, a real laugh, which surprised her. When he stood up to leave, he hesitated. This is probably weird, he said. You've said that twice now, she pointed out, because I keep doing weird things. He reached into the breast pocket of his jacket and pulled out a pen. Then he picked up a napkin from the dispenser at the edge of the table and wrote something on it. He slid it toward her. Millbrook's been looking for someone to help with administrative stuff, scheduling, coordination, that kind of thing. Nothing fancy, but if you're looking, he pushed the napkin an inch closer. That's the hiring manager, Karen Solis. She's decent. Tell her Ethan Walker sent you. It won't guarantee anything, but it won't hurt either. Olivia looked at the napkin, then at him. I was a CEO, she said. The words came out before she'd decided to say them, and for a second she felt the old reflex. To qualify, to manage, to make sure nobody thought she was bragging or asking for something. But Ethan just nodded, slowly, like this was useful information that he was processing rather than something that changed the fundamental situation. Okay, he said. The offer stands. She picked up the napkin. Thank you, she said. Again. Take care of yourself, he said. He said it the way people say things when they mean them. Then he put on his jacket, nodded to Gloria on his way past, and pushed through the door into the rain. The bell rang once. Olivia sat with the napkin in her hand and finished her coffee. She sat there for a while after he left, long enough that the rain against the window softened from a steady patter to an occasional tick, long enough that the diner thinned out around her and the teenage boy in the apron came by to wipe down the adjacent tables with the world-weary efficiency of a person who was probably being paid slightly too little for this. She thought about the napkin, Karen Solis, hiring manager, Millbrook Industrial Supply, and a phone number written in handwriting that leaned slightly to the right, the way people write when they're not trying to impress anyone. She had not worked in supply logistics. She had not worked in anything adjacent to it. She had run a tech company that built data infrastructure software for mid-sized healthcare companies, which was the kind of sentence that took a while to explain and that most people nodded through without fully absorbing. The gap between that and scheduling coordinator at an industrial supply company was not a small gap. It was, in fact, an enormous gap. She folded the napkin carefully, crease over crease, and tucked it into the front pocket of her bag where she would be able to find it again. She had made exactly one decision since walking out of that conference room in Chicago 3 months ago that she was not ashamed of, and it was this: She was not going to wait for the version of her life that felt appropriate. She was going to take whatever the actual available version was and work with it. She had not been very good at this decision. She had made it multiple times because she kept having to remake it. But she had made it, and she was making it again now, sitting in a booth at Patty's Diner in Hallow Creek with $7.43 in her bank account and the name of a hiring manager written on a paper napkin. Oh. She walked back to the parking garage in the dark. The rain had slowed to almost nothing, just a mist that caught the streetlights and made everything look slightly more significant than it was. She walked past a hardware store, a dry cleaner, a pharmacy with a light on in the back, past a church with a marquee sign that had 3 burned-out letters so the message read, something she couldn't make sense of. She thought about Ethan Walker, about the fact that he hadn't asked her what she used to be. He hadn't been impressed or unimpressed by her. He had just looked, paid, stayed, left. She thought about the way he'd said that happens when she told him she was between things. No pity in it, no performance, just the acknowledgement of someone who had personally found that to be true and had come out the other side of it, more or less intact. She reached the parking garage. The stairwell smelled like wet concrete and motor oil. Her footsteps echoed up the levels, each one returning to her just slightly delayed. On the second level, she stopped. She took out the napkin, smoothed it open against her palm under the fluorescent light. Karen Solis. She thought about what she would say, what version of herself she would walk in as, whether there was a way to frame a former CEO applying for an admin coordinator position that didn't immediately make people uncomfortable, because people got uncomfortable with that, she'd found. They assumed you were either desperate or temporarily slumming, both of which made it hard for everyone. She would have to be careful. She would have to be honest about her background without letting it become the story, because the story she needed to tell was not "I used to be important." That story had no useful ending right now. The story she needed to tell was, "I am capable, and I show up, and I will do the work that needs doing." She folded the napkin back up. The parking garage hummed around her. A car somewhere below her started and pulled out, headlights sweeping across the concrete wall and then disappearing. She walked back to her car, removed the orange sticker from the windshield, and sat in the driver's seat for a moment with the engine off. Then she took out her phone and opened her email and started drafting a note to herself with the subject line, "Monday morning, call Karen Solis, 9 a.m. She didn't let herself qualify it. She didn't write maybe, or if I'm ready, or depending on how the weekend goes. She just wrote what she meant. 9 a.m., call. She put the phone in the cup holder and drove out of the garage into the wet, quiet street. The mist moved in the headlights like something alive. She had $7.43 and a napkin and a plan. It wasn't much, but she had started with less. She called it 9:04 Monday morning, not 9 o'clock, because 9 o'clock felt aggressive, like she was sitting with her finger over the dial button counting down the seconds, which she had been, but didn't want to advertise. 4 minutes felt more like a person who had simply remembered at a reasonable hour and picked up the phone. It rang 3 times. She was already composing the voicemail in her head when someone picked up. Millbrook Industrial? Karen Solis speaking. The voice was brisk and not unfriendly. The voice of someone who answered a lot of phone calls and had learned to sound available without sounding excited about it. "Hi," Olivia said. "My name is Olivia Hart. I was referred by Ethan Walker. I'm calling about the administrative coordinator position." A brief pause, keyboard clicking in the background. "Ethan mentioned you might call." That stopped her. "He did?" "Last Friday. Said he'd met someone who might be a good fit." Another click. "Can you come in Wednesday? We're doing first-round interviews in the morning." She looked at her reflection in the bathroom mirror of the motel room she'd been paying for by the week. The cheapest option she'd found within walking distance of the parking garage where her car now permanently lived, more or less. She looked at the jacket hanging on the back of the door, the one she'd spot cleaned with a damp cloth and hung up to dry overnight. "Wednesday works," she said. "What time?" 10 o'clock. "Bring a resume if you have one. It's pretty casual." She didn't have a printed resume. She had one she could print at the library 2 blocks over for 15 cents a page, which she had already looked up. "I'll be there," she said. "Thank you." She hung up and sat on the edge of the bed and took a breath that came out slightly uneven at the end, The way breathing does when you've been holding yourself very still for a while and suddenly don't have to. Ethan had called ahead. On a Friday afternoon, after a 45-minute lunch break, this man had apparently gone back to wherever he worked and mentioned her to someone. Not because he had to, not because she'd asked him to, just because he had decided that she was worth the mention. She sat with that for a moment longer than she needed to. Then she got up and started thinking about what to wear. The Millbrook Industrial Supply Building sat at the end of a long access road off Route 9, about 2 miles from the diner. It was not impressive from the outside. A flat-roof facility with a large warehouse attached to one side and a modest front office with a parking lot that held maybe 30 cars and a flagpole that needed a new rope. The landscaping was functional rather than decorative. A strip of grass along the front, a line of evergreen shrubs that someone had trimmed recently, but not artfully. Olivia had walked from the motel. 40 minutes, give or take. She arrived with 8 minutes to spare, which gave her time to stand in the parking lot and make sure she was breathing normally. She was wearing the jacket, a pressed blouse she'd borrowed an iron from the front desk to finish, and a pair of slacks that had been living in the bottom of her bag since Chicago and had recovered mostly. She had no briefcase. The leather one she'd used for years had been in her office when she left, and she'd been too wrecked in those first weeks to think about retrieving it. She had a manila envelope with 3 copies of her resume inside. She looked at the building. The building looked back, indifferently. She walked in. The front office smelled like toner and burnt coffee, and faintly, machine oil drifting in from the warehouse side. A young man at the reception desk looked up when she pushed through the glass door. "I have a 10 o'clock with Karen Solis," she said. "Name? Olivia Hart." He typed something. "I'll let her know. You can have a seat." The waiting area had 4 chairs, a low table with a trade magazine and a promotional calendar from a vendor in 2023, and a window that looked out onto the side parking lot. She sat. She did not pick up the trade magazine. She put her envelope on her knees and kept her hands on top of it and looked at the window and ran through, one more time, what she had decided to say and what she had decided not to say. The resume was honest. That was the first decision she'd made and the one she'd gone back and forth on the most. It listed Heartbridge as founder and CEO, 6 years, with the end date and no further explanation in the document itself. She'd thought about leaving it out, listing other things, restructuring the timeline. She'd spent 2 hours on it the night before in the library, going back and forth, and she had ended up leaving it in because the alternative was lying, and she had decided months ago, in the abstract, that she wasn't going to do that anymore. Olivia? Karen Solis was 50-something, short, with reading glasses pushed up into her hair and the no-wasted motion demeanor of someone who ran a tight ship and wasn't particularly self-congratulatory about it. She extended a hand. "Karen, come on back." "What?" The office was small and organized, the walls holding a whiteboard, a corkboard layered with scheduling sheets, and a framed photo of 2 teenagers standing in front of a lake somewhere green. A second chair had been pulled up across from Karen's desk, and there was a half-eaten granola bar on the corner of the desk that Karen moved to a drawer without comment. "So," Karen said, leaning back, "Ethan said you were good people. That's not his typical vocabulary, so I took it seriously." She opened the folder in front of her, the resume Olivia had emailed the night before. "Tell me about Heartbridge." Here it was. Olivia had prepared 3 versions of the answer. The first was comprehensive and would take about 4 minutes and was more information than a 10 o'clock interview at an industrial supply company required. The second was vague enough to be almost dishonest. The third was what she actually said. "I co-founded it out of grad school. We built data infrastructure software for healthcare companies, mid-size mostly. We raised 2 rounds of funding, grew to about 60 employees, and had solid contracts when I left." She paused. "I left under difficult circumstances. There was a disagreement at the board level about direction, and I came out on the wrong side of it, so I don't have the company anymore." Karen looked at her over the folder. "You get pushed out?" "Essentially, yes." "That happen a lot in tech?" "More than people advertise." Karen made a sound that might have been acknowledgement or might have been something else. She looked back at the resume. "You've never done administrative coordination?" "Not formally. I've done everything that coordination involves: scheduling, logistics, vendor management, internal communication, keeping a lot of moving pieces from running into each other. I just did it as part of running a company rather than as the job title. That's a generous framing. It's an accurate one, Olivia said. She said it evenly, not defensively. I'm not going to pretend the gap doesn't exist. The gap exists, but I'm organized, I'm reliable, I work well under pressure, and I won't be difficult to manage. I need steady work, and I'm not too proud to do whatever the work actually is. Karen tapped the folder once with her index finger. Why Millbrook specifically? Ethan suggested it, Olivia said. I don't know a lot about the company, but someone who had just met me was willing to mention me to a hiring manager, which says something about how he thinks of the people he works with. That was enough. Karen looked at her for a moment. A real look, the assessing kind. We're not glamorous, she said. It's scheduling, coordination, data entry, some vendor communication. The pay is not what you were making. I know. I mean significantly not. I understand. Another pause. Can you start next Monday if we move forward? Yes, Olivia said. Karen closed the folder. I'm interviewing 2 other people this week. I'll let you know by Friday. Olivia stood and extended her hand. Thank you for your time. Thank you for coming in. Karen shook it. Then, as Olivia turned toward the door, for what it's worth, it takes something to walk in here when you've run your own company. I don't know if I could do it. Olivia turned back. You could if you needed to, she said. She meant it as a statement of fact. Karen seemed to receive it that way. Friday came. She was in the library. She went there most mornings because it was warm and had Wi-Fi and nobody looked at you too long. When her phone buzzed with the number she'd saved as Millbrook, Karen. She stepped outside into the November air, answered on the second ring. We'd like to offer you the position, Karen said. Monday at 8. Dress as casual. Don't bring anything fancy. I'll be there, Olivia said. See you then. The call lasted 45 seconds. She stood on the sidewalk outside the library with her phone in her hand and the sky the particular flat gray it gets in November when it can't decide whether to rain or not. A woman walked past her with a stroller. A man in a postal uniform was loading packages into a truck. The street was ordinary and indifferent and going about its business. She called nobody. There was nobody to call, really. Her mother would worry. Her former colleagues were former colleagues. Her friends from before Hartbridge had drifted in the way friends drift when you spend 6 years building something that consumes every hour you have. She had made the particular kind of choices that leave you, at 30, with a very thin personal life and a very thick professional one. And now the professional one was gone. She put the phone in her pocket and walked back toward the motel. She had a job. An administrative coordinator position at an industrial supply company in a town she'd never planned to stop in, paying slightly less than a third of what she'd been earning 2 years ago. She didn't let herself think about the comparison. She had learned in the last few months that comparisons were a specific kind of poison. They made the real thing in front of you feel like failure, when it was actually just a different thing, a necessary thing, the thing that was available. She would go on Monday. She would be early. She would do the work. That was what she had. Monday arrived the way Mondays do when you've been waiting for them. Suddenly, before you're entirely ready, with the alarm going off at 6:15 in a motel room that looked worse in early morning light than it did at night. She showered, she dressed, she ate half a granola bar and drank instant coffee from the machine in the hallway that dispensed it into a paper cup with a sound like someone clearing their throat. She walked the 2 miles to Millbrook Industrial in the dark. She arrived at 7:44. The woman at reception, different from the young man who'd been there for her interview, looked up with mild surprise. "You're early." "I know," Olivia said. "I can wait." "Karen's in. I'll tell her you're here." Karen appeared 2 minutes later, already moving, glasses down from her hair and on her face, a coffee mug in one hand and a folder in the other. She glanced at the clock on the wall. "You're early," she said. "You mentioned 8 o'clock, Olivia said. "I wanted to be settled before 8 o'clock. Karen looked at her for a second. "Okay, come on back." The administrative office where Olivia would be working was a large open room with 4 desks, filing cabinets along one wall, and windows that looked into the warehouse through a glass partition. 3 of the desks were occupied. A man named Pete, who was probably 60 and seemed to operate at roughly half the speed of everyone else, but with twice the accuracy. A woman named Diane, who was 35 and had the clipped efficiency of someone who had been doing this job long enough to have strong opinions about the right way to do everything. And an empty desk near the window that had clearly belonged to someone recently, because there was still a small potted succulent on it that nobody had moved. "That was Janelle's," Diane said when she caught Olivia looking at it. "She got transferred to the Harrisburg branch. You want it, or should I move it?" "Leave it," Olivia said. "I'll water it." Diane looked at her. "It's a succulent. It doesn't need water." "Right." Olivia sat down. "Then I'll just leave it." Pete made a sound from his desk that might have been a laugh. The work itself was not glamorous. Karen had said so, and she had been honest about it. Olivia spent the first 3 days learning the scheduling system, an outdated piece of software called FleetMate that had apparently been installed during the George W. Bush administration and updated approximately twice since then, with a user interface that made her physically tense the first time she opened it. She spent those days taking notes in a yellow legal pad, asking Pete questions because Pete knew where everything was, even if he found it at his own pace, and not offering opinions on anything because she had promised herself she wouldn't do that yet. She had learned, from her years running a company, that the first instinct of smart people dropped into unfamiliar systems is to identify inefficiencies immediately and announce them. It makes you feel useful. It also, she had come to understand, makes people defensive because what you're really saying is your system is broken, which translates to you are broken for using it. She had made that mistake before. She wasn't going to make it at Millbrook, so she took notes. She asked questions that positioned the existing way of doing things as the starting point rather than the problem. She learned the rhythms of the room, Pete's coffee at 9 and 2, Diane's lunch at exactly noon eaten at her desk while reading something on her phone, the sound the printer made when it needed paper versus the sound it made when it needed a new toner cartridge. She showed up at 7:44 every morning. She didn't say anything about that either. She saw Ethan for the first time at the end of her second week. She'd known he worked there, obviously. She had taken the job in part because he worked there, but the building was larger than it looked from the front, and the warehouse operations were largely separate from the administrative office. And she had begun to wonder in a low-level background way whether she'd imagined the whole thing. The diner, the rain, the napkin. Whether she had built something in her head that was simpler and more ordinary than it had felt in the moment. Then she was walking from the administrative office to the warehouse floor to deliver a scheduling update to the floor supervisor, something she'd been doing for 3 days and was still slightly nervous about, because the warehouse operated at a pace and volume that felt like a different language. When she passed a corridor she hadn't been down yet and heard from around the corner a voice she recognized. Told them the delivery window was Tuesday, and they booked it for Thursday. Now we've got a truck sitting at the dock and no one to receive. She stopped. Just for a second. Then she kept walking, because the warehouse floor was the other direction, and she had a schedule update to deliver. And she was not going to go looking for someone who had bought her a sandwich to report that she had, in fact, taken his advice and shown up. But she was aware, for the rest of that day, of a slight loosening somewhere in her chest. Like something that had been held in place by tension was now held in place by something slightly more reliable. She passed him in the break room on a Thursday. He was at the coffee machine, not paying attention, staring at something on his phone, with the expression of a person reading something they weren't sure was good news or bad news. She went to the refrigerator, got out the lunch she'd brought. She had started bringing lunch because the math worked better that way, and because Pete had informed her on day 2 that the nearest decent takeout was 12 minutes by car, and she didn't have a car, and was at the counter opening the container before he looked up and saw her. For a moment his face did the thing faces do when you encounter someone you know in an unexpected context. A slight recalibration, the expression catching up with recognition. "Hey," he said. "Hey," she said. He looked at her. She looked at him. The coffee machine beeped. "You got the job," he said. "I got the job." "Karen's good," he said. "She can be intense, but she's fair." "She's been straight with me," Olivia said. I appreciate that. He nodded. He picked up his coffee. She started eating her lunch, leftovers from the night before, pasta she'd made on the hot plate that was technically against the motel's policy, but that the front desk had decided to overlook. You doing okay? He asked, not intrusively. It was a real question, a checking-in question, the kind of question that actually wanted an answer but wouldn't push if the answer wasn't available. She thought about it. Better than I was, she said. Still getting sorted, but better. Good, he said, and then, Lily's still in the orange and beige phase, by the way. Just so you know, the situation hasn't resolved. She laughed. It surprised her again. Not the laugh itself, but the realness of it, the way it came from somewhere involuntary. What's the current orange offering? Sweet potatoes, carrots, cheddar crackers. He held up 3 fingers. Those are the pillars. Anything outside the pillars gets looked at like she's being asked to eat the table. How long has this been going on? 7 weeks. Her pediatrician says it's a phase. He took a sip of his coffee. 7 weeks feels like more than a phase. Have you tried sweet potato with cheddar? That might be able to exist in the same bite. He looked at her. That's actually a good idea. I have them occasionally, she said. He smiled at that. A real smile, a small one, not performed. Then his phone buzzed and he looked at it and the smile shifted into the expression people make when reality has reasserted itself. I've got to get back. Truck thing. Go, she said. He went. She finished her pasta and watched the afternoon light move across the break room floor and thought that this was a thing she had not expected, that the person who had helped her would turn out to be someone she could talk to without feeling like she owed a debt that had to be carefully managed. Most kindness came with a structure, even when it wasn't meant to. A record of it, somewhere, in both parties. This didn't feel like that. It felt like 2 people who had ended up at the same place for different reasons and had found that the other person was, against the odds, not exhausting to be around. That was rarer than it sounded. The weeks moved. November pushed into December with the grinding reluctance of a month that has been too cold for too long and isn't going to apologize for it. The landscape around Millbrook went gray-brown and stayed there. The parking lot frosted over in the mornings, and someone had put down a bucket of sand near the entrance that was half empty by the second week of December. Olivia's motel bill was no longer terrifying. It was still uncomfortable, but she was beginning to catch up in the slow way you catch up when you've been significantly behind. Not in leaps, but in the math gradually improving, the number of days before the end of the month, and the number of dollars remaining in the account beginning to stop feeling like they were racing each other. She had paid the minimum on one of the credit cards that had been sitting in collections since September. It wasn't much, but she called and made the payment herself, without a settlement intermediary, which felt like something. At Millbrook, things were going quietly well, which was a phrase she had to be careful with because she'd learned that quietly well was easy to miss from the inside. The scheduling system, the ancient, aggravating fleetmate, she had begun to understand at a level beyond its interface. She started keeping a supplementary spreadsheet that mapped delivery windows against vendor lead times in a way the software couldn't do automatically, which reduced the number of dock conflicts by about 30% over 6 weeks. She hadn't announced this. She'd just done it, shared it with Pete when he needed it, mentioned it to Karen casually when Karen noticed the dock conflict numbers dropping. What changed? Karen had asked. The tracking, Olivia said. The system can't cross-reference lead times automatically, so I built something that does it alongside it. Karen had looked at the spreadsheet she'd pulled up, looked at it for a while. Did you tell Pete you were doing this? He's been using it for 3 weeks. Did you tell me? I'm telling you now, Olivia said. I didn't want to make a presentation out of it. It's just a spreadsheet. Karen closed the laptop. Don't undersell your work, she said. That's not humility, that's bad communication. Olivia had sat with that afterward. Karen was right. There was a difference between not grandstanding and making yourself invisible, and she had been so focused on not being the former that she drifted toward the latter. She added quarterly operations summary to her task list and started drafting one that afternoon. She and Ethan developed the thing that develops between 2 people who share a building and don't avoid each other. Something that wasn't quite friendship yet, but was heading in that direction at the pace things actually move when both people are busy and neither one is pushing. Break room conversations that lasted longer than the coffee required. The occasional parking lot exchange at the end of the day, which for Ethan meant his truck and for Olivia meant the beginning of a 2-mile walk that she was careful not to mention because she didn't want him to feel obligated to offer her a ride, and she didn't want to accept one because that felt like a different category of owing. She learned things about him the way you learn things about people when there's no particular reason to be performing. Incidentally, in pieces, out of order. He had grown up in Hallow Creek. His father had worked at a different supply company, one that had closed in 2008, and Ethan had watched that happen at 15 and had been working steadily ever since in the particular way of someone who had seen what happened when you stopped. His daughter Lily's mother had left when Lily was 18 months old, not dramatically, not cruelly, just gone in the way people go when they decide that the life they're in is not the life they want and can't find a way to say so directly. He didn't talk about this often, and when he did, he described it without bitterness, which she thought was either the healthiest thing she'd heard or the kind of thing that costs a person more than they let on. He was not a complainer. He was also not relentlessly positive in the way that made her suspicious of people. He could say when something was hard and not feel the need to immediately pivot to the silver lining. He just had a kind of equilibrium that wasn't performed. It was structural. It was how he was built. She didn't entirely understand how someone got built that way, but she was aware that she herself was not built that way and had spent a good portion of her 30s up to now trying to fake it. One afternoon in the break room, the 3rd week of December, a Wednesday, the kind of gray afternoon that makes the inside of a building feel particularly sealed off from time, she told him something she hadn't told anyone at Millbrook. "I haven't told Karen the full story," she said. It came out more abrupt than she'd meant it to. Ethan looked up from his phone. "The full story of what?" "Hartbridge. How I left." She was holding her coffee and looking at the table. "She knows I left under difficult circumstances. She doesn't know the details." "You don't have to tell her," he said. "I know." She paused. "I've been thinking about it because the longer I'm here, the more it feels like a lie of omission, and I'm not—" She stopped, tried again. "I spent 6 years building something, and the way it ended makes me look bad. On paper, without context." "What happened?" "If you want to say." She told him. Not everything, but the real version. Marcus, the board votes, the restructuring, the resignation letter drafted by someone else that she had signed because fighting it would have cost more than she had left. She told him about the conference room with the view of Lake Michigan and the 4 places she had signed her name and the haze that followed. He listened without filling in the pauses. That was a thing she'd noticed about him. He didn't rescue silences. He let them sit until something real came to fill them. "That's a lot to carry around," he said when she was done. "It's starting to get lighter," she said. "This job helps, actually, having somewhere to be." "Yeah." He turned his coffee cup slowly in his hands. "That part's underrated, just having somewhere to be." "Were there times you didn't?" she asked. "Have somewhere?" He was quiet for a moment. "After Lily's mom left, I took 3 weeks off. I told work it was a family emergency, which was technically true. I had a 6-month-old and no idea what I was doing, and I just sat in the house mostly. Watched the same TV show over and over. Ate whatever was in the freezer." He looked up at her. "Then one morning Lily woke up at 5, and I got up to get her, and the sun was coming up, and she was just looking at me, like I was the whole world." A pause. "I called my supervisor that morning and said I was coming back Monday." Olivia looked at him. "She does that still," he said. "Looks at me like that. It's a lot of pressure." He said it dryly. "But it's also the most useful thing anyone has ever done for me." She thought about that for the rest of the day. Christmas came and went. She spent it in the motel, which was a fact she was not particularly proud of and was also not going to pretend was other than what it was. She bought herself a small thing from the drugstore, a box of good tea, not fancy, but better than the generic kind she'd been buying, and made a cup with the electric kettle she'd acquired secondhand from a thrift store on Route 9, and she sat on the edge of the bed and drank it, and was aware, without sentimentality, that she had survived a year that had tried fairly hard to undo her. She was still standing, financially diminished, domestically reduced, professionally recalibrated to a degree that would have been incomprehensible to her 2 years ago. But standing. She made another cup of tea. She opened the Notes app on her phone and wrote, at the bottom of a long list she'd been keeping of things she needed to address. A new item. Find an apartment. February. Not January. February was realistic. January was wishful thinking. She was learning to tell the difference. The new year arrived the way it does when you're waiting for it, with less ceremony than expected. At Millbrook, January meant budgeting season, which meant Karen was running on less sleep and more coffee, and the administrative office had a particular charged stillness that Olivia had learned to navigate by being very accurate and very on time with everything. She had earned something at Millbrook by this point, not status, nothing like that, but a kind of credibility that comes from consistently doing what you said you'd do. Pete had started coming to her with questions about the scheduling system, which had originally been her asking him questions, and this inversion had happened so gradually that neither of them had remarked on it. Diane, who had seemed constitutionally suspicious of Olivia in the early weeks, had softened to the point where she occasionally sent her the funny links she'd been silently circulating around the office for years. Karen had given her a small raise in January during a 10-minute conversation that Karen had delivered with her usual economy of words and that Olivia had received with more emotion than she showed. "You're good at this," Karen said. "You're also underutilized, and I know that, and I can't do much about it right now. But I wanted to say it." "I appreciate you saying it," Olivia said. "Don't let me forget it," Karen said, which was the closest Karen came to making promises. She found an apartment in February. Third floor of a building on Elm Street, 12 minutes from Millbrook on foot, 1 bedroom, the bathroom tiles slightly mismatched from a renovation that had clearly been done by someone who stopped caring about halfway through. The landlord was a retired plumber named Gus, who lived on the first floor and had the slow-blinking calm of someone who had seen everything a building could do and was no longer surprised by any of it. The first night she slept there, on a mattress she'd bought off a Facebook Marketplace listing from a woman in the next town over who'd delivered it in her pickup truck, she lay in the dark and listened to the building settle around her and felt something she recognized distantly as the return of something she'd given up on a little too quickly. Not happiness. Not yet. Not exactly. But the specific texture of a life that belonged to her. The mismatched tiles. The particular creak of the third-floor landing. The view from the bedroom window, which was mostly the neighboring building's brick wall, and a sliver of street that she could see a piece of if she stood at the right angle. It was hers. She turned over, pulled the blanket up, and slept. The thing about rebuilding is that it doesn't look like anything from the inside. From the inside, it looks like Tuesday. It looks like getting up and making coffee and walking 12 minutes to a job that wasn't what you planned and doing the work anyway, and then doing it again on Wednesday and again after that. There's no montage. There's no morning where you wake up and feel the shift. There's just the accumulation of ordinary days until one day you realize the weight you've been carrying is slightly less than it was, and you can't identify the exact moment it changed because it didn't change in a moment. It changed in increments too small to name. For Olivia, that realization arrived on a Tuesday in March, 7 weeks after she'd moved into the Elm Street apartment, in the parking lot of a grocery store 2 blocks from her building. She was loading bags into a cloth tote she'd bought at the library's fundraiser table for $2, and she was thinking about the scheduling conflict she needed to resolve by Thursday. And she was not thinking about Marcus Hale or the conference room in Chicago or the orange sticker on the windshield of a car she'd long since sold. And she noticed, with the particular alertness that comes from being used to carrying something heavy, that she was not thinking about those things, not suppressing them, not avoiding them, just not thinking about them because her mind had other business. She stood in the parking lot for a moment with a bag of groceries in each hand and registered this. Then she finished loading and walked home. Spring came to Hallow Creek the way spring comes to places that have earned it. Grudgingly at first, a week of warmth followed by a week of cold, then warmth again, until eventually the cold stopped bothering to return and the trees along Route 9 did the thing they do every year that manages to be surprising anyway. At Millbrook, the first quarter numbers had come in, and they were good. Not exceptional, but measurably better than the same period the previous year. And Karen had distributed a summary at the all-staff meeting in March, with the particular restraint of someone who considered public celebration unprofessional but still wanted people to know. Olivia had sat in that meeting and looked at the scheduling metrics in the summary: the dock conflict reduction, the vendor lead time improvements, the on-time delivery percentage, which had moved from 73% to 89% over 6 months, and had felt something she hadn't let herself feel in a long time. Not pride exactly. Not yet. More like the specific satisfaction of work that counted. After the meeting, Pete had leaned over from his desk and said, without looking up from his keyboard, "Good numbers." From Pete, this was a speech. "Thanks, Pete," she said. "Didn't say it was you," he said. "I know." "Was, though," he said, and went back to typing. She turned back to her own screen and smiled in a direction nobody could see. The conversation that changed things happened on a Thursday afternoon in April, and it started because of a printer. The administrative office's primary printer had been intermittently jamming for 2 weeks, and on this particular Thursday, it jammed twice in 40 minutes during a rush on shipping documents, and Olivia had fixed it the first time and fixed it again the second time, and was standing at the machine pressing the paper release button with the particular grim focus of someone who has decided to win this fight on principle, when Tom Garrett walked in. She knew Tom Garrett by name and by reputation. Everyone at Millbrook knew Tom Garrett by name and by reputation, because Tom Garrett was VP of Operations for the Northeast region, which meant he had oversight of Millbrook and 4 other facilities, and he appeared in person at Millbrook approximately once a quarter with the unsettling energy of someone who noticed everything but commented on very little. He was 55, silver-haired, wore the kind of clothes that were not expensive but were always exactly right, and had a way of asking questions that sounded casual and were not. He walked in looking for Karen, who was not there. She was at a vendor meeting that had run over, and Olivia told him so, and he said he'd wait. He sat in the chair across from her desk and looked around the room in the way he did, and Olivia went back to the printer. The paper release worked. She extracted the jammed sheet in one piece, which felt like a minor personal victory. She reloaded the tray, hit print, and watched the documents come through clean. "How long has that been happening?" Tom asked. She turned. He was still looking at the printer. 2 weeks, she said. "I've put in a service request. It's in the queue. The queue for that vendor runs about 3 weeks. I know. I'm managing around it until it's fixed." He looked at her then. "You're Olivia Hart." "Yes." "Karen mentioned you," he said. "The scheduling improvements." She didn't respond to this directly. She had learned not to perform modesty and also not to overclaim, and in the space between those two options, she had found that saying nothing briefly was usually fine. "What was the dock conflict rate before?" he asked. "Before my system or before the tracking changes I made to FleetMate?" "Either." She told him the numbers. He asked a follow-up question about the vendor lead time mapping. She answered it. He asked another. She answered that one too, and the conversation stretched in the way conversations stretch, when two people have found something they actually want to talk about, and neither of them had entirely expected this to be the room where it happened. Karen arrived 40 minutes later and stopped in the doorway with an expression that cycled through surprise and something else in about half a second. "Tom, sorry. The meeting ran long." "It's fine," he said, still looking at his notes. "I've been talking to Olivia." Karen looked at Olivia. Olivia looked at Karen with an expression that she hoped communicated, "I didn't ask for this. I was just fixing the printer." The following Monday, Karen called her into the office. She closed the door, which was unusual. Karen was not a door closer by default. "Tom wants to know your background," she said. "The full version." Olivia sat down. "I figured." "I told him what I know. He wants to hear it from you directly. He's setting up a call for next week." A pause. "Karen, you should have told me sooner," Karen said. Not harshly, just clearly. "I know," Olivia said. "I was worried about how it would land." "I understand that," Karen said, "and I understand why. But I want you to know, it doesn't change anything about what I think of your work here. The work is the work regardless of where you came from. She paused. It does, however, change what I think is possible for you at this company, and I'd like to have that conversation with you, after you talk to Tom. Olivia looked at her. What kind of conversation? The kind where I tell you that you're doing the job of a coordinator while thinking at the level of a director, and I'd like that to stop being a mismatch. The room was very quiet for a moment. Okay, Olivia said. Okay, Karen repeated. She picked up a pen, clicked it once, set it down. One other thing. Whatever happened at your last company, I've been in operations long enough to know how boards work. I'm not holding the outcome against you. Olivia looked at her hands for a second. Thank you for saying that. I don't say things I don't mean, Karen said. You should know that about me by now. I do, Olivia said. The call with Tom Garrett lasted an hour and 15 minutes. She had prepared for it the way she used to prepare for investor meetings. Not with a script, but with clarity about what she knew and what she didn't, and what she was willing to say about both. She had learned, over 6 years of raising money and running a company, that the most dangerous thing you could do in a high-stakes conversation was reach for an answer you didn't have. People could tell. And what they took from it wasn't that you'd gotten the answer wrong, it was that you were willing to fake it, which told them something much more useful. Tom asked her about Heartbridge. She told him the real version, which by now she had gotten better at telling, not because it had become easier, but because she had told it enough times that the places it used to snag had worn smooth. She told him about the board, about Marcus, about the restructuring. She told him about the conference room and the 4 signatures and what came after. He listened without interrupting, which was its own kind of pressure. With some people, silence meant they were storing ammunition. With Tom, she couldn't tell. When she finished, he said, "What would you do differently?" She had expected that question. She had asked herself that question so many times in the last 9 months that she had stopped expecting it to produce new answers, and then it kept producing them anyway, at inconvenient hours. I would have built better board relationships earlier, she said. I was good at building the product and the team. I wasn't as good at managing the people who had structural power over me because I thought the product should speak for itself. That's a mistake you only make once. What else? I would have trusted my instincts on Marcus sooner. There were signals I explained away because I didn't want to see them. That's not a thing I'd do again. Can you guarantee that? No, she said. I can tell you why I understand it better now than I did then, and you can decide whether that's enough. Another pause. What do you think you can do at Millbrook, he said, that you're not currently doing? She took a breath. Supply chain coordination across the regional facilities is currently siloed, she said. Each facility runs its own scheduling and vendor management, which means you're losing leverage on vendor negotiations and carrying redundant overhead at the coordination level. If you standardize the scheduling framework I've been running at Hallow Creek and applied it across the Northeast region, you'd see efficiency gains at each facility and combined negotiating position with your top-tier vendors. Silence. You've been here 5 months, he said. 6, she said. I've been paying attention. Another pause. She couldn't read it. She waited. Send me a written summary of that, he said. What you'd change, how you'd change it, what the projected impact looks like. 2 pages, not 20. When do you want it? End of next week. You'll have it Wednesday, she said. She didn't tell Ethan about the Tom Garrett call that week. She didn't want to make it into something before she knew what it was. She had learned at Heartbridge to be careful with momentum, how quickly it could feel like certainty, how easily certainty could become the thing you fell from. But she was distracted, and Ethan noticed. They had settled into a loose rhythm by April. Lunch on Tuesdays in the break room, which had started accidentally and continued by unspoken agreement, the kind of thing that becomes habit so gradually that you can't remember deciding to do it. He would bring whatever Lily's daycare situation had allowed him to pack that morning, which varied considerably, and she would bring whatever she had, which was usually more organized because she had only herself to account for. They ate and talked about work things and non-work things, and sometimes sat in compatible silence, which was the thing she had not expected to find but had come to value considerably. You're somewhere else today, he said on Tuesday. present but not. She looked up from her container. Sorry, I've got something on my mind. Work? Yeah. He nodded. He didn't push. That was the thing about him. He could ask a question and then let you not answer it without making the not answering feel like a rejection. Tom Garrett called me last week, she said after a minute. He looked up. Garrett? What did he want? He wants me to write up a proposal for restructuring regional operations coordination. She said it flat, not dramatizing it. Based on the scheduling changes I've made here. Ethan was quiet for a moment, working through what that meant. He knew the company well enough to understand the scale of it. That's not a small thing, he said. No. You gonna do it? I already sent it, she said. Wednesday. He set down his fork. And? And I'm waiting. She picked up her coffee. Which is the part I'm not very good at. You're good at it, he said. You just don't like it. Those aren't the same thing. No, he agreed. They're not. She looked at him. You're not going to ask me what the proposal says? I figure you'll tell me if you want to. He picked up his fork again. Does it matter what it says? It matters a lot. I meant, he paused. You clearly know what you're talking about. Either he can see that or he can't. What the proposal says isn't really what's being evaluated. She considered that. It wasn't wrong. It was also not entirely comforting, which was probably why it landed. How's Lily? She asked. Still orange and beige, he said. We had a breakthrough with butternut squash ravioli last week. I thought we'd turned a corner. He shook his head. She ate around the filling. Olivia laughed. She found a way. She always does, he said, and the way he said it was the way you describe someone you find both maddening and extraordinary. Tom Garrett's response came on a Friday afternoon in late April via email to both her and Karen, with two other names copied that she recognized as regional directors. The subject line was Operations Coordination Initiative, MET-NE Region. The body of the email was 4 sentences long. She read it twice, then she called Karen. Did you see Tom's email? Just now, Karen said. He wants to set up a cross-facility working group, with you running it. I read that, Olivia said. Her voice was steady. Her hands were not entirely steady, but she had put them flat on the desk. How do you feel about it? I feel like I need to understand exactly what it means before I feel anything about it. That's fair, Karen said. I'll set up a call with Tom for early next week. You and me together. A pause. Olivia, this is real. I want you to let it be real. She closed her eyes for 1 second. Okay, she said. Top. The working group was not a promotion, not officially, not yet. It was a project, a cross-facility operations improvement initiative with Olivia as lead coordinator. It came with a temporary title change, a modest salary adjustment, and the particular weight of being responsible for something that affected people you hadn't met yet, at facilities you'd never been to, reporting to a VP who had given you 6 weeks to show him you could do what you said you could do. It was also, she recognized clearly, the most engaged she had been with work since the last year at Hartbridge. The good year, the year before everything went sideways, when the product was working and the team was right and she would stay late, not because she had to, but because she was genuinely interested in what was going to happen next. She had forgotten what that felt like. She was careful not to get ahead of herself. She had a talent, which she was not particularly proud of, for projecting outcomes, for seeing the version of something that was 3 steps further along than the current reality and starting to inhabit it prematurely. It had been useful at Hartbridge when it was a thing called vision. It had also been a liability when it became a thing called not paying attention to what was actually happening. So she stayed with the current reality, 1 working group, 6 weeks, 2 facilities in addition to Hallow Creek, and a 2-page proposal she now had to actually execute. She started on Monday. Martian. The first cross-facility meeting was held by video conference on a Wednesday morning, and it was, in Olivia's private assessment, a mild disaster. She had prepared thoroughly. She had sent a pre-read document to the participants the Friday before. She had an agenda that was specific and timed and anchored to actual data from each facility. She had, she believed, done everything right. What she had not accounted for was that the Harrisburg facilities coordinator, a man named Dave Kowalski, who had been running their scheduling operation for 11 years and had not been consulted before Tom Garrett's email arrived, was going to spend the first 20 minutes of a 40-minute meeting asking pointed questions about authority and process that were not actually questions about authority and process. They were, she understood by minute 12, expressions of territorial anxiety wrapped in the language of procedure. She had dealt with this before. At Heartbridge, you dealt with it constantly. The person in the room who had decided the initiative was a threat before they knew what it was, and who would drain momentum at every opportunity until you either addressed them directly or lost the room. She did not make the mistake she would have made at 27, which was to push past him and assume competence would carry the day. She stopped the agenda. "Dave," she said, "I want to make sure I'm hearing you correctly. Can you tell me specifically what you're worried about?" He blinked. People didn't usually ask that directly. "I'm not worried," he said. "Okay. Can you tell me specifically what you need to understand about this initiative before you can engage with it?" A pause. The other faces on the video call were doing the careful neutrality of people watching something that might turn into something. "I need to know who has final say on scheduling decisions at my facility," Dave said, "because my director has approved our current process, and I'm not clear on whether this overrides that." "It doesn't override anything," Olivia said. "This initiative is a framework, not a mandate. Every facility keeps operational control. What changes is the data sharing and the vendor coordination at the regional level. Your scheduling decisions stay yours." "That's not what the proposal says." "Which part?" She pulled up the document on her screen. "Tell me the specific language." He told her. She looked at it. He was not entirely wrong. There was a sentence in Section 2 that was genuinely ambiguous, that she had written quickly and should have read one more time. "You're right that it's unclear," she said. "I'll revise it. Thank you for catching that." He stopped. He had clearly expected to be argued with. "The intent is what I described," she continued, "but the language should match the intent, and it doesn't quite. I'll have a revised version to everyone by end of day." The rest of the meeting went normally. Afterward, Karen called her. "I was listening," she said. "How are you feeling?" "Tired," Olivia said honestly. "But okay." "You handled Dave well." "I made an error in the document." "You caught the error, acknowledged it, and didn't die about it," Karen said. "That's different from making an error. Dave is going to be your most useful critic going forward, whether he means to be or not." Olivia thought about that. "That's a kind frame." "I've been in operations 30 years, Karen said. "I've learned to find the useful thing in the annoying thing. It takes practice." May moved quickly. She drove to Harrisburg twice, to Burlington once. She sat in rooms with people who had been running their piece of Millbrook's operation for years and who were, in varying degrees, skeptical of her. She did not fight the skepticism. She asked questions and listened to the answers and took notes in a yellow legal pad and came back with follow-up and showed up when she said she would show up. Dave Kowalski sent her an email in mid-May with 3 additional observations about the scheduling framework that were sharp and specific and showed he had read the revised proposal carefully. She wrote back, "These are good. I'm incorporating all 3. Thank you." He wrote back, "The lead time mapping on priority vendors needs another look too." She wrote back, "Agreed. Can we do a call this week?" They did a call. It lasted 40 minutes. By the end, she was not sure they liked each other, but she was fairly sure they could work together, which was, in her experience, the more durable arrangement. At Millbrook, her desk in the administrative office remained her desk. She had not moved, not been given a different office, not been separated in any structural way from Pete and Diane, and the Fleetmate scheduling system in Gloria's Diner 2 miles down Route 9. She was still in the same building she had walked into in November, wearing rain-dampened clothes and carrying a manila envelope. This was a thing she thought about sometimes. Not with irony, she had moved past the irony phase mostly, but with something more careful. The version of her that had walked into Millbrook 5 months ago had needed a desk and a paycheck and a reason to get up in the morning and walk somewhere. Those were not small things. She was not going to reach the other side of them and decide they had been beneath her. They had been exactly what was required. She thought about this one afternoon in May, standing at the window in the administrative office, watching the warehouse through the glass partition. A forklift was moving a pallet. Two guys in work jackets were talking, one of them pointing at something on a clipboard. The warehouse floor was loud even through the glass. You couldn't hear it exactly, but you could see the movement of it, the particular organized chaos of things being moved from where they were to where they needed to be. Ethan was somewhere in there. She couldn't see him from where she stood, but she knew he was working a late shift that week because his daughter was with her grandmother and he'd picked up the extra hours. He had mentioned it Tuesday. He had said it the way he said most things, plainly, without drama, as information rather than complaint. She had been thinking about him more than was strictly explainable by the fact that they had lunch on Tuesdays. This was something she had been aware of for a while and had been careful with, the way you are careful with things that feel important and fragile and that you cannot afford to mishandle. She had not said anything. She was not going to say anything yet. There were good reasons for that, not least of which was that they worked in the same building and that her life was still in the process of being rebuilt, and she was not going to reach for something she wasn't standing on solid enough ground to actually hold. But she was aware of it. She turned back to her desk. But the first real sign that things at Millbrook were shifting in a structural way came in the third week of May, when Tom Garrett sent a calendar invitation for a meeting to Olivia, Karen, and three names she didn't recognize, two of whom she was able to identify as regional directors from other parts of the country, and one of whom she couldn't place. The meeting was titled Regional Ops Coordination, Expansion Discussion. It was scheduled for the second week of June. She stared at the invitation for a while before accepting it. Karen appeared at her office door. Olivia had been moved to a small separate office 2 weeks earlier, a change that had happened quietly and that she had not mentioned to anyone except Ethan, and only because he'd asked why her desk was being moved. "You saw the invite," Karen said. "Just now." Karen leaned against the doorframe. "Tom's been talking to corporate about the framework. They want to discuss applying it beyond the Northeast." Olivia looked at her. "How far beyond?" "That's what the meeting is for." Karen's expression was doing something complicated. "I want to be honest with you about something." "Okay." "When this grows past a regional initiative, your role in it is going to change significantly. And I'm going to lose you from this office, which I've been expecting, and which I'm—" She stopped. "I've been running this facility for 9 years, and the people I've worked with who have what you have, I can count on one hand." She paused. "I want you to know that before you walk into that meeting, because you should walk in there knowing your own worth clearly, without anyone else's hand on the scale." Olivia was quiet for a moment. "Thank you," she said. It came out slightly rough at the edges. "Don't thank me," Karen said. "Just don't waste it." She pushed off the doorframe and went back to her office. Olivia turned back to her screen and looked at the calendar invitation and the names she didn't recognize, and the title that meant something she wasn't going to fully believe yet because she had learned the cost of believing things too early. But she accepted the meeting, and she started making notes. She told Ethan that Tuesday. They were in the break room, and she had barely sat down before she said it, not performing casualness, just leading with the thing, because she had gotten tired of performing casualness around him. "Tom Garrett is setting up a meeting with corporate about expanding the operations framework," she said. "National, potentially." He set down his fork. He looked at her. "Olivia," he said, "I know." "That's—" He stopped, looked at his fork, looked back at her. "That's a big thing." "It might be a big thing," she said. "I'm not counting on it until I know what it actually is." Still, she agreed. He was quiet for a second. There was something moving behind his expression that she couldn't fully read and was aware she was spending more time than usual trying to. "You've been here 7 months," he said. 6.5. "You walked in here in November." He said it like he was just reviewing the facts, not pointing to anything. "I saw you in the break room and I thought—" He paused. "What?" she asked. He looked at her steadily. "I thought she's going to be a problem." She blinked. "A problem?" "Not in a bad way," he said quickly. "In the way where someone's going to come in and make everyone else realize they've been doing things the hard way for years. That kind of problem." He picked up his fork again. I was right. That's very gracious, she said. I'm a gracious person, he said, and the dryness of it made her laugh. She looked at her lunch. She looked at the window. She looked back at him. I'm scared, she said. She hadn't planned to say it. Of this meeting, of what it might turn into and what it might not turn into. I'm better at being scared than I used to be, but I'm still scared. He nodded slowly. He didn't tell her not to be. He didn't tell her it would be fine. He said, That sounds right. That's a very unhelpful thing to say, she said. Yeah, he said, but it's true. She looked at him. He looked back. The break room went on around them. The hum of the refrigerator, the faraway sound of the warehouse, the particular stillness of a Tuesday afternoon. Thank you, she said. For the napkin. Way back when? He frowned slightly. The napkin? In the diner. You wrote Karen's name on a napkin. He thought about it. Then he made a sound that was somewhere between a laugh and something else. Yeah, he said. I remember. It mattered, she said. I want you to know that. I know you know that it helped, but I want you to know it actually mattered. The specific act of it. He looked at her for a moment. Not away, not at his lunch, just at her. I know, he said quietly. The refrigerator hummed. Neither of them moved. The meeting with corporate was on a Tuesday. She had known the date for 3 weeks, and for 3 weeks she had done the thing she had trained herself to do in the years since Heartbridge, which was to prepare thoroughly and then put the preparation away and not think about the meeting every waking hour, because thinking about it every waking hour did not improve the outcome and did measurably damage everything else. She had become moderately good at this. Not good. Moderately good. The distinction mattered. The night before, she had reviewed her notes one final time, closed the folder, made a cup of tea, and watched 40 minutes of a documentary about competitive fishing that she had no particular interest in but that required nothing of her. Then she had gone to bed at 10:30, which was earlier than she usually managed the night before something significant, and had lain in the dark for a while listening to the building settle and thinking about nothing in particular until sleep arrived. She took the early bus to the Millbrook Regional Office where the meeting was being held, which was 40 minutes from Hallow Creek, and which she had been to once before, for a vendor coordination session in April. The bus was mostly empty. She sat in the second row with her bag on her lap and her folder inside it and watched the early morning version of Route 9 out the window. Gas stations, hardware stores, the long, flat stretches of road that she had walked in the rain 8 months ago and that now looked different to her, though she couldn't say exactly how. Tom Garrett was already in the conference room when she arrived. So was Karen, who had driven separately and who met Olivia's eyes when she walked in with an expression that communicated, in Karen's economy of gesture, "You're fine, you're ready, don't be weird about it." The 3 names from the calendar invitation resolved into people. Donna Park, who was VP of Operations for the Southeast region, a sharp-faced woman in her late 40s who shook hands firmly and took in the room with the practiced attention of someone who had sat in a lot of these meetings and had stopped being impressed by rooms. Richard Cho, VP of Strategy, who was younger than Olivia expected and wore the slightly over-caffeinated alertness of someone perpetually running slightly behind and compensating with speed. And Sandra Ellison, SVP of Operations, which meant she was Tom Garrett's boss, who was 60, silver-haired, and said almost nothing in the first 20 minutes, and everything she said landed with the quiet authority of someone who did not need volume to be heard. Olivia sat across from Sandra Ellison and kept her hands still and breathed normally. The meeting lasted 2 hours and 40 minutes. It began with Tom walking through the Northeast regional data, the numbers Olivia had seen before, the ones that had started this whole thread, the dock conflict reduction, and the delivery percentages and the vendor lead time improvements. He presented them without flourish, because Tom Garrett was not a flourish person. But the numbers did their own work and everyone in the room could read a spreadsheet. Then he said, "I'd like Olivia to speak to the framework directly. She built it." She had not been told she would be asked to present. She had assumed she might be, which was why she had prepared as if she would be. But hearing it stated plainly in a room with Sandra Ellison in it produced a brief physical response that she managed without letting it reach her face. She spoke for 12 minutes. She had timed her prepared version, and it ran 14, and she had cut 2 minutes of what she privately called the scaffolding, the explanatory context that was necessary when she wasn't sure how much the audience knew, but that could be dropped when she could see from the room that they already understood. Sandra Ellison understood. She could tell by the 3 minutes of the 12 during which Sandra Ellison did not look at the data on the screen in front of her, but instead looked at Olivia, steadily and without particular expression. When she finished, Richard Cho asked 2 questions about implementation velocity: how long to roll out at a new facility, what the primary resistance points were, how she had addressed them. She answered both cleanly, citing the Burlington and Harrisburg rollouts and the specific friction she'd encountered with Dave Kowalski and what had resolved it. Donna Park asked about vendor relationship management during the transition period. Good question, the most specific one in the room, which meant Donna Park had read the proposal carefully. Olivia gave her the honest answer, which included the part where the transition created a 2-week ambiguity window that she had managed by over-communicating with 3 key vendors in a way that was slightly time-intensive but had prevented 2 potential conflicts. "It's not elegant," she said, "but it works." Donna Park made a note. Sandra Ellison had not spoken directly to Olivia yet. She had asked one question of Tom early in the meeting about capital expenditure implications, and Tom had deferred to Richard Cho, who had answered. She had nodded. She had made no notes. When the room had gone through its questions and reached the natural pause that precedes the part where someone says what everyone is actually there to decide, Sandra Ellison put her pen down. She had been holding it, but not writing with it, and looked at Olivia. "Tell me about Heartbridge," she said. The room got slightly quieter, though it had been quiet. Olivia had told this story before. She had told it to Karen and to Tom and to Ethan in various forms at various levels of honesty, and each time she had told it, she had gotten slightly better at the telling. Not smoother, but more accurate, which she thought was the more important thing. She told it now, to Sandra Ellison, in a conference room with Tom Garrett and Karen and 2 VPs she had met 90 minutes ago. She told it without softening it and without dramatizing it. She explained what Heartbridge was, what she had built, what Marcus had done, how the board had moved, and how she had ended up in Hallow Creek with a napkin and a phone call and a job she had been grateful for. She told it in 4 minutes. When she finished, Sandra looked at her for a moment, then, "What did you learn?" "That competence isn't protection," Olivia said. "That you can build something good and still lose it if you're not paying attention to the right things." I was paying attention to the product. I should have been paying more attention to the people with structural power over the product. And now? Now I know that both things have to be true at the same time. Another pause. Sandra looked at her pen on the table, then at Olivia. "You know that this framework, if we expand it nationally, is a significant operational leadership role, not an administrative coordinator role." "I understand that." "You've been an administrative coordinator for 8 months. 7.5, Olivia said. "And before that I ran a 60-person company for 6 years. I know which of those is more relevant to this conversation." Something moved across Sandra Ellison's face that was not quite a smile, but was adjacent to one. "Yes," she said. "I think you do." Bison. She walked out of this building at 12:47 in the afternoon into June sunlight, with Karen beside her and the specific internal stillness that descends when something significant has happened and you haven't yet fully landed on what it means. They walked to Karen's car. Karen unlocked it, got in, and Olivia got in the passenger side, and they sat there for a moment without starting the engine. "Well," Karen said. "Yeah," Olivia said. "Sandra doesn't ask follow-up questions about people she's not interested in," Karen said. "She asked you 3. "I counted 2. "The one before you came in," Karen said. She asked Tom how you'd ended up at Millbrook. He told her the diner story." Olivia looked at her. "He knows about the diner?" "I told him," Karen said. "When he asked about you in November, I thought it was relevant context." She sat with that for a second. "And Sandra," she said, "and she stayed." Karen looked out the windshield. "That's what Sandra said. I thought you should know." The June sunlight was doing something with the hood of the car, and a bird was moving somewhere in the tree line, and Route 9 was going about its business in the middle distance. Ordinary afternoon, completely ordinary. Thank you for being there, Olivia said. I was the one who hired you, Karen said. I had an interest in the outcome. She started the car. I'm going to take you back to Hallow Creek, and then I'm going to go home and drink a glass of wine, and tomorrow morning we can talk about what comes next. What does come next? Sandra's office will be in touch within the week, I'd expect, Karen said. There'll be a formal offer. There'll be a title. There'll be a number that is not what you were making at Hartbridge and is significantly more than what you're making now. She pulled out of the parking lot. And then you'll have to decide. Decide what? Karen glanced at her. Whether you're ready to be in charge of something again. The car merged onto Route 9 and the miles moved by, and Olivia watched them go and turned the question over in her mind like a stone she was checking from every angle before committing to a verdict. Whether she was ready. She thought she was. She was not entirely sure she trusted the thought yet, but she thought it. She texted Ethan at 2:15 on her way back into the Millbrook building because she had his number from a work thing in March and had never texted it for anything personal and was doing so now before she could talk herself into waiting. Meeting went well, she wrote. More than well. Can we talk later? He wrote back in 4 minutes. Break room at 4? Yes, she wrote. She put the phone in her pocket and went back to her desk and worked until 4 o'clock without checking her phone again, which was a form of discipline that cost her something, but which she had decided was the right call. He was already there when she arrived. 2 coffees on the table, which meant he had gotten there early enough to make them, which she registered without commenting on. She sat down. He looked at her. Tell me, he said. She told him. The meeting, Sandra Ellison, the questions, the thing Karen had said in the car about Sandra asking Tom how she'd ended up at Millbrook. She told him plainly and in order and watched his face as she did, which was something she had started doing more consciously in the last few weeks, paying attention to what was happening in his expression when he thought she wasn't particularly watching. When she finished, he was quiet for a moment. They're going to offer you a national role, he said. It wasn't a question. Probably. And you'll take it. She looked at him. I don't know yet. Come on, he said. It wasn't an accusation, more like the tone of someone calling something by its real name. It's more complicated than yes or no, she said. It's mostly yes or no, he said. Not pushing her toward an answer, just not pretending the question was as open as she was making it. She picked up her coffee, set it down. It would change things here, at Millbrook. It would change your job at Millbrook, he said. That's not the same as changing things here. She looked at him. Olivia, he said. And the way he said her name was different from the way he usually said it, slightly more careful, like he was aware of the weight of what came next. You've been here 8 months. You walked in here needing a starting place and you found one, and you used it the right way. But it was always a starting place. You knew that. I knew that. He paused. Taking the next thing isn't leaving. She was quiet for a moment. It feels like it might be. What does? She looked at the table, at the coffees he'd made before she arrived, at the break room window and the afternoon light coming through it, and the particular ordinary permanence of this room that she had not expected to become something she valued. This, she said, all of this. It sounds ridiculous to say it out loud. It doesn't, he said. I came here broke and, she stopped. I came here in a pretty bad state, and this place gave me back something I thought I'd lost. The ability to be useful, the ability to show up somewhere and do something that mattered. She looked up. I don't want to be careless with that. He was looking at her with the steady attention that was particular to him, the kind that didn't flinch from what it was looking at. You won't be, he said. That's not who you are. You don't know who I was before, she said. At Hartbridge, I could be pretty careless when I was moving fast. You're not moving fast right now, he said. You're sitting in a break room thinking very carefully about what things mean. That's not the person you were describing. She looked at him for a long moment. What happens to Tuesday lunches? She said. He was quiet for a second. Something shifted in his expression, subtle, the way things shift with people who have learned to hold things carefully. I don't know, he said. What do you want to happen to them? I asked first, she said. He almost smiled. That's not how this works. I know, she said. She looked at her hands. I don't want them to stop. I want to be clear about that. He picked up his coffee, set it down. Then they don't stop. Even if my office is somewhere else. Where's the office? I don't know yet. Karen thinks they'll want me based in the regional hub. That's 30 miles from here. He nodded slowly. That's not the same as gone. No, she said. It's not. They sat there for a while in the way they had gotten good at sitting, not filling every space, not performing ease, just being in the same room with a thing they were both aware of and had not named yet, which was a thing she was aware they were going to have to name eventually, and soon, but which could wait another few days for the ground to settle under her first. Sandra Ellison's office sent an email on Thursday, 2 days after the meeting. It came to Olivia's work address at 3:47 in the afternoon, from a name she didn't recognize, Sandra's executive assistant, with the subject line Follow-up, Regional Operations Initiative. Inside was a request for a call with Sandra directly, the following Monday at 10. Not Tom Garrett, Sandra herself. She read it twice. Then she forwarded it to Karen with no message, because Karen would understand without one. Karen replied in 3 minutes. Monday at 10. Block your calendar. Friday arrived with the particular quality of Fridays in early June. A loosening in the building, a slightly lighter quality to the afternoon, people going home early in the way they do when the weather is good enough to justify it. The warehouse wrapped up a half hour ahead of schedule. Pete went home at 3 without announcing it, which was Pete's version of a farewell. Diane, on her way out, stopped at Olivia's office door. I heard something about a national role, she said. Not gossipy. Diane was not a gossip person. More like she was raising a thing she thought should be raised directly. There's a call on Monday, Olivia said. Nothing's decided. Okay. Diane looked at her for a second. You've been good here. I want you to know I think that. I wasn't sure about you at first. I know, Olivia said. You were too quiet. People who are too quiet at the beginning are usually either very good or very trouble. And the verdict? I think you know the verdict, Diane said, or you wouldn't be getting a call with Sandra Ellison. She picked up her bag. Have a good weekend. You too, Diane. She left. The office went quiet. Olivia sat at her desk for a few minutes, not working, just sitting. The building was emptying around her in the particular gradual way of late Friday afternoons. The warehouse had gone to its after-hours rhythm, lower, slower. Through the glass partition, she could see the floor in the long horizontal light of early evening, everything still, the forklifts parked and the pallets stacked and the whole organized system of it at rest. She had come here in November with nowhere else to go. She was still here in June, which was a different thing. She was locking her office at 5:30 when she heard him in the hallway. Ethan, coming from the warehouse side, jacket on, keys in hand, looking like a man at the end of a week that had been longer than it was supposed to be. He stopped when he saw her. Still here? He said. Just leaving. She pulled the office door shut. You? Long day, he said. Lily's at my mom's tonight. I was thinking about getting something to eat. He paused. Not quite casual, but close. You want to come? She looked at him. This was a shift. They both knew it was a shift. He had stated it plainly, which was characteristic of him and which she appreciated, and he was looking at her with the particular combination of directness and carefulness that she had come to associate with the times he was saying something that actually mattered to him. Where? She asked. There's a place on Clement Street, nothing special, better than the break room. That's a low bar, she said. Yeah, he said, but it clears it. She pulled her bag up on her shoulder. Okay, on. The place on Clement Street was a Thai restaurant called Siam Garden, which had 8 tables, a fish tank with 2 fish, and a menu laminated in the particular brittle way that meant it had been laminated some years ago and had been wiped down many times since. It was half full on a Friday evening, unhurried, the kind of place that did a quiet, steady business without requiring ambiance to do it. They sat across from each other and ordered without the particular performance that first dinners sometimes involve. She got the pad see ew, he got the green curry. They split the spring rolls without discussing it, the way you do with someone you have already established a rhythm with. They talked about the week, about the warehouse issue that had come up Wednesday. A vendor had delivered to the wrong dock, and it had created a cascade that had taken 3 hours to untangle. About Lily, who had apparently eaten an entire bowl of macaroni and cheese the night before, which Ethan described with the relief of a man who had been watching a child subsist on crackers for 7 weeks and had finally seen evidence that the hunger was still there underneath the pickiness. She told him about Diane's comment on the way out. "Too quiet?" he said. "Initially, you're not that quiet." "I was careful," she said. "At the beginning, I didn't want to come in and step on everything." "You were quiet in the break room for maybe a week," he said. "After that, you had opinions about the printer." "The printer deserved opinions." "It really did," he agreed. The food arrived. They ate for a while without talking, the way you eat when the food is good enough to pay attention to and you're comfortable enough with someone to not need noise to fill the space. "I'm going to take the roll," she said. It came out while she was looking at her plate. "If they offer it the way I think they will, I'm going to take it." He looked up. "Yeah?" "Yeah." She looked up too. "I've been thinking about what you said, about it being a starting place. You were right." "I usually am," he said. She laughed. "Don't push it." He smiled, that small, real smile. "How do you feel about it?" "Terrified," she said, "and ready, which I think is the correct combination." "Better than just terrified," he said. "Better than just ready too," she said. "I was just ready once at Hartbridge. Wasn't scared enough. That was part of the problem." He nodded. He understood that. She could see him understanding it, not from personal parallel, but from the particular attention he paid when she said things that were true about herself. "What does the role look like?" he asked. "National Operations Coordinator for the Regional Framework, based out of the regional hub on the state line, 30 miles. She picked up her water. "I'd be building out the version of the framework I built here, at every facility in the country, over probably 18 months. That's a big thing." "It's the thing I know how to do," she said, "which feels different now than it did a year ago. A year ago I knew how to do it, but I didn't know why it was worth doing. I just thought it was worth doing because we'd built it." She paused. "Now I know that the thing that makes it worth doing is the people on the other end of it, the ones who need the system to work so they can do their jobs. Pete, Ethan." She looked at him. "The whole floor." He was quiet for a moment. "That's a different frame," he said. "Yeah," she said. "I think it's the right one." She looked at him across the table and he looked back at her, and the restaurant went on around them. The quiet conversations at other tables, the fish tank bubbling in the corner, the easy, unhurried Friday evening of a place that was nothing special and was exactly right. "Can I say something?" he said. "Yes," she said. "I've been—" He stopped, looked at the table, looked back up. "I'm not good at this. I want to be upfront about that. I haven't done this in a long time, and I'm not sure I do it well even when I'm in practice." "Done what?" she said, though she was fairly sure she knew. "This," he said. He gestured vaguely at the table and the dinner and the space between them. "This specific thing, whatever this is." She looked at him. "What do you think it is?" "I think it's the part where I tell you that Tuesday lunches are not enough for me anymore," he said, "and that I'd like to know whether that's a problem." She sat with the words for a moment, not because she didn't know the answer, but because she wanted to give it the weight it deserved. "It's not a problem," she said. He exhaled, very slightly, in the way people exhale when they've been holding something carefully for a long time and have finally been given a surface to set it down on. "Okay," he said. "Okay," she said. They looked at each other. The fish tank bubbled. A server passed with plates for the next table. Outside, Clement Street was doing whatever it did on Friday evenings in June. "I'm still figuring out what my life looks like," she said. "I want to be honest about that. It's better than it was, but it's not. I'm still in the process of things." "I know," he said. "I'm not asking you to have it figured out." "What are you asking?" He thought about it. I'm asking whether, when you're figuring it out, I can be in the same room. She looked at him for a long moment. At the man who had stood up in a diner on a rainy afternoon without being asked and paid for a meal she couldn't afford, and written a name on a napkin and changed the specific direction of her life without knowing that's what he was doing. Yes, she said, you can be in the same room. The Monday call with Sandra Ellison lasted 35 minutes. At the end of it, Sandra said, "We'd like to offer you the Director of National Operations Coordination role reporting to me with a formal start in 4 weeks. Karen Solis has agreed to a 2-week transition. You'll have a team of 6 and a mandate to expand from there as the rollout progresses." "I accept," Olivia said. "Good," Sandra said. "I'll have the formal offer letter by Wednesday. One more thing." "Yes?" "What you described in the meeting, about paying attention to people with structural power. I want you to know that I noticed that." A pause. "Not because it was impressive, because it was honest. That's harder." Olivia was quiet for a second. "Thank you." "Don't thank me," Sandra said. "Do the job." The call ended. She sat in her office, the small office at Millbrook, with the window that looked onto the warehouse floor and the filing cabinet with the sticky drawer and the succulent she'd been not watering for 7 months that was thriving anyway. And she stayed very still for a moment, Director of National Operations Coordination. She said it once in the empty office, quietly, not performing it, just checking how it sat in her mouth. Whether it felt like something borrowed or something real, it felt real. She picked up her phone and called Karen first because that was right. Then she sat back down and looked out the glass partition at the warehouse floor, where the afternoon shift was moving in its organized way. Forklifts and pallets and people doing the work that made the whole system go. And she thought about what Sandra had said. Do the job. She intended to. She also intended to have dinner on Clement Street on Friday with a man who had once stood up in a diner without being asked, and who had been, without making a show of it, one of the more consequential decisions she'd ever benefited from. She was aware that was a strange thing to be grateful for. She was grateful for it anyway. The 4 weeks between accepting the offer and her official start date moved in 2 different speeds simultaneously, fast in the way that weeks move when there is too much to do, and slow in the way that time moves when you are paying attention to something you know is ending. She spent the first week in transition with Karen, going through everything methodically the way Karen did everything. Organized, unsentimental, thorough. They mapped the scheduling system she'd built, documented the vendor relationships she'd cultivated, cataloged the quirks and workarounds that had accumulated over 8 months and that lived nowhere official, the things you only know after living inside something long enough to understand where it breathes. Olivia wrote all of it down. She was determined to leave Millbrook Hollow Creek with the same operational clarity she'd spent 8 months building into it, because it mattered to her that the place continued to work well after she was gone. Not because she needed the credit, because Pete was still at his desk and Diane was still eating lunch at noon, and the warehouse floor was still running on the work of people who deserved a system that held. Her replacement had been posted internally and externally, and Karen had 2 strong candidates. Olivia reviewed both resumes at Karen's request and gave her honest assessment without inflating it, which Karen appreciated because Karen could always tell when an assessment was inflated, and it made her trust the source less. "You'd take either of them?" Karen asked. "Candidate B has better instincts about logistics," Olivia said. "Candidate A has better instincts about people. For this specific desk, I'd go with A." Karen had looked at the files. "That's my read too," she said. "Good." She hired candidate A the following Wednesday. Her name was Isabel, and she was 28, and she came in for a 2-hour orientation with Olivia the Thursday before Olivia's last day, and asked smart questions and took notes in a specific color-coded system that Olivia thought was slightly overcomplicated but said nothing about because you don't inherit someone's methods. You develop your own, and that was the right way. "The printer jams on the second tray," Olivia told her near the end. "The service request has been in since March. Don't wait for the vendor. There's a reset sequence that fixes it about 60% of the time." "What is it?" Olivia wrote it on a sticky note and put it on the side of the printer where it would be visible but not embarrassing. Isabel looked at it and nodded. "Anything else?" Isabel asked. Olivia thought about it. Pete knows where everything is, she said. He moves slow. Ask him anyway. Her last day at Millbrook Hollow Creek was a Friday, which felt right. Karen had said nothing about a send-off. Olivia had not asked for one because she was not gone. She was 30 miles away, still in the same company, still accessible. And making a production of it felt like overclaiming what the departure was. But when 4 o'clock arrived and she was packing the last things from her office into a box that was embarrassingly small for 8 months of work, the succulent, a coffee mug, 2 books she'd kept for reference, the yellow legal pad she'd been filling since November. Diane appeared in the doorway with a small cake in a bakery box, and Pete behind her holding paper plates like someone had handed them to him unexpectedly, and he'd decided to commit. It's from the place on Route 9, Diane said. The bakery, not the diner. Don't read into it. I won't, Olivia said. They ate cake standing up in the office. Diane, Pete, Isabel, 2 people from the warehouse floor whose names Olivia knew and who had apparently been told by someone that there was cake, and Karen, who appeared at the very end, accepted a slice, ate it in 4 bites, and said, Good luck. Don't be a stranger. The operational reports come to me directly, so I'll know if the framework falls apart. It won't, Olivia said. I know it won't, Karen said. I was giving you the opportunity to say that. She shook Olivia's hand. Then, with the particular unexpectedness of someone who had decided to do a thing before they could reconsider it, she pulled her into a brief, firm hug that lasted exactly 2 seconds, and then was over. She was already walking back toward her office before Olivia had fully processed it. Pete set his paper plate on the desk and looked at Olivia with the steady, slow-blinking attention of a man who had witnessed a great many things and formed views on all of them. You did good here, he said. Thank you, Pete. I'm not saying it twice, he said. I know, she said. He picked up his plate and went back to his desk, and that was that. Ethan was waiting in the parking lot. He was leaning against his truck with his jacket on and his hands in his pockets, and the expression of someone who had been waiting a comfortable amount of time and was not making a thing of it. When she came through the door with her small box, he straightened up and came to take it from her without being asked. How's the cake? He said. How did you know there was cake? Diane texted me, he said. We have each other's numbers from the warehouse schedule thing in February. She looked at him. Diane texted you. She said, and I'm quoting, there's cake, don't be late. He put the box in the back seat. I was not late. She stood in the parking lot of Millbrook Industrial Supply in the June evening, with the building behind her and the flagpole in front of her and the flat light of early summer across the parking lot, and she felt the weight of the last 8 months in a way she hadn't let herself feel it all at once before. Not as grief, not as relief exactly, but as something more complex than either. The specific texture of a place that had held her when she needed holding and had asked only the work in return, and she had given the work. And here she was. You okay? Ethan said. Yeah, she said. She meant it. Yeah, I'm okay. He looked at her for a second. You want to drive around for a bit? Before wherever we're going? She looked at him. Yeah, she said. Actually, I do. They drove Route 9 in the long June evening with the windows down partway and no particular destination, and she watched the road she had walked in the rain 8 months ago move past in the headlights and felt the strange doubling of it, the then and the now layered over each other, not canceling out, just coexisting, the way things do when you've lived long enough inside a place to have a before and an after there. She told him that, not elegantly. She said, It's weird to drive a road you used to walk. Which part? He said. All of it, the speed, the fact that I'm in a car. She looked out the window. I walked this road a lot those first few months, before I had the apartment. I didn't have a car for a while. I know, he said. She looked at him. You knew? You mentioned it once, in passing, the bus schedule. He kept his eyes on the road. I wasn't going to make a thing of it. She looked back out the window. The highway moved by. A gas station lit up against the darkening sky. The hardware store. the long stretches between. Why not? She said. Because you weren't making a thing of it, he said, and it was yours to handle the way you wanted to handle it. She thought about that for a while. You're a good person, she said. She said it plainly because she meant it plainly. He was quiet for a second. I try, he said. You don't try that hard, she said. That's what I mean. It's not effortful for you. It's just how you are. It's effortful sometimes, he said. When? He thought about it. When I'm tired. When Lily's been sick for 3 days and I haven't slept. When I get a call from the school and I'm in the middle of a shift and I have to figure out in real time which one takes priority. He glanced at her. Most people are decent when things are going fine. The question is what's left when things aren't fine. What's left for you? Usually the basics, he said. Show up. Do the next thing. Don't make the situation worse. He paused. It's not that interesting. It's exactly that interesting, she said. He glanced at her again. She was looking at the road ahead, and he turned back to it, and they drove in silence for a while that was not empty. They ended up at the diner, not on purpose, or rather, on the kind of not on purpose that is actually entirely purposeful, where you take a route that happens to pass a place and don't suggest turning around. Ethan pulled into the parking lot of Patty's without commenting on it, and she didn't say anything either until they were out of the truck and standing in the parking lot, and she looked at the hand-painted sign and the faded P and the neon open sign blinking in the window. This is where we ended up, she said. Convenient, he said. It's where we started, she said. I know, he said. She pushed the door open. The bell rang once, the same bell, the same note, and the smell was the same. Coffee and bacon grease and something sweet. And the warmth hit her in the same way it had on a rainy November afternoon when she had been 30 years old and broke and too proud to cry and not quite out of options, because as it had turned out, she had not been out of options at all. She had just been unable to see them from where she was standing. Gloria was there. Different shift than usual, but there. She looked up when the door opened and took them in. Olivia, Ethan, the particular way they came in together. And her face did the thing faces do when they're processing something that pleases them. Well, she said, look at that. Hi, Gloria, Olivia said. You two want a booth? Please, Ethan said. She led them to the same booth. Olivia was fairly sure it was the same one, or close enough. The window seat, the warm laminate. She slid in and put her hands flat on the table, and the surface was warm from the afternoon sun, the way it had been then. And she sat with her hands there for a second the same way she had then, and felt the distance between the two moments like a physical thing. You all right? Ethan said. I was sitting like this, she said, 8 months ago, in this booth, with my hands flat on the table. She looked up. I remember thinking the table was warm. It surprised me. He looked at her hands on the table, then at her. What were you thinking about? Honestly? She considered it. I was thinking about whether I had enough to cover the check, and then I was thinking about whether any of it was going to be okay. She paused. Whether I was going to be okay. And were you? Eventually, she said. Not immediately, but eventually. Gloria came back with menus and 2 waters and the automatic coffee refill for the neighboring table, and they ordered. Olivia got the turkey sandwich because it seemed right, because some gestures are more meaningful when they're deliberate, and they sat in the booth, and the diner went on around them in its ordinary, steady way. Can I tell you something? She said. You can tell me anything, he said. I've been thinking a lot about what made the difference, she said, between the version of this year that happened and the version where I stayed in the hole I was in. She looked at him. And I keep coming back to the same thing. What thing? The fact that you stood up, she said. In this diner. You stood up and came over and you didn't ask me anything. You didn't want anything. You just did the thing, and then you stayed long enough to write a name on a napkin. She paused. That's it. That's the hinge. He looked at her. I bought you lunch, he said. It was $11. I know what it was, she said. I'm not arguing with you, he said. I just want to make sure you know that it wasn't. I didn't do it because I saw something in you or because I had a plan. I did it because you looked like you needed someone to do it, and I happened to be there. I know that too, she said. That's the part that mattered. You didn't do it because you expected a return on it. You did it because it was the next right thing, and you were capable of doing it. He was quiet. Most people aren't capable of that, she said. Not because they're bad people, just because they're thinking about other things, or they're tired, or they've decided it's not their problem. You weren't doing any of that. She looked at him steadily. You were just present, in the right way, at the right moment. He looked at his water glass. You would have figured it out, he said, without the lunch, without the napkin. Maybe, she said. I hope so, but I don't know that. I know what actually happened, and what actually happened had you in it. He looked up. There was something in his face that he wasn't entirely managing. Not distress, not embarrassment, more like the expression of someone who has been seen in a way they weren't anticipating and are figuring out where to stand. Okay, he said. It was quiet and real. Okay, she said. Gloria brought the food. They ate. Quote, the thing about sitting in a diner booth with someone at the end of a significant day is that the conversation finds its own level. They talked about the new job, the specific things she was going to have to do in the first 90 days, which she had already mapped, which was a habit she had, and that she was no longer apologetic about. They talked about Dave Kowalski in Harrisburg, who had sent her an email that morning saying he expected her to stay in communication about the framework even at the national level, which she had read as a form of endorsement from someone who did not give endorsements easily. They talked about Lily. She had started first grade in September. She had opinions about her teacher, her classroom, the specific injustice of the lunch schedule, all of it delivered in the decisive certainty of a 6-year-old who had inherited her father's equilibrium and applied it to a very different set of priorities. She's going to be formidable, Olivia said. She already is, Ethan said. She's currently formidable about why she should be allowed to watch one more episode before bed. She makes her case every night. Does it work? Sometimes, he admitted. She found a logical flaw in my bedtime argument last Tuesday, and I genuinely didn't have a rebuttal. Olivia laughed. What was the flaw? I told her it was time for bed because it was 8 o'clock. She asked me why 8 o'clock was bedtime, and I said, because that's when tired people go to sleep, and she said she wasn't tired. And I said, that's what tired people say, and she said, that's circular reasoning. He looked at her. She's 6. Where did she learn circular reasoning? I have no idea, he said. I'm a little scared to find out. She was still laughing when she looked at him and found him looking back at her with the particular expression she had started recognizing over the last few weeks. Not searching, not tentative, just present. Seeing her. The way she was right now, laughing in a diner booth at the end of a complicated day, not the version of her that was Director of National Operations Coordination, and not the version that had been broke and walking in the rain, the current version, with all its specifics. She thought, this is what it feels like to be known by someone, not known about. Known. What? She said. Nothing, he said. You look happy. She considered that. I am, she said. Right now, yeah. Good, he said simply. They stayed until Gloria began doing the quiet choreography of closing, wiping down the counter, flipping chairs at the empty tables, dimming the light above the dessert case, not rushing anyone, just moving the room toward its end. Ethan flagged her down. Check, please, Gloria. Gloria came over with the ticket and set it on the table. Olivia reached for it at the same time Ethan did, and their hands arrived at the same moment, and they both stopped. I've got it, Olivia said. He looked at her. You don't have to. I know I don't have to, she said. I want to. She looked at him. You paid last time, 8 months ago. Let me even it out. He sat back. The last time you paid for anything in this diner, you couldn't cover the check, he said. Not a criticism, just a fact. I'm aware, she said. That's why I want to do it. He looked at her for a moment. Then he moved his hand back. Okay, he said. She paid. She left Gloria a tip that was more than she needed to and that she was not going to explain or qualify. Gloria folded it into her apron pocket and said, You two have a good night now. Thank you, Gloria, Olivia said. Come back sometime, Gloria said. She said it to both of them. The parking lot was dark and warm, the June evening having settled into that particular soft density of summer nights in small towns. Crickets somewhere, a car moving past on Route 9 at a distance, the light from the diner spilling out across the asphalt in a long yellow rectangle. They stood beside Ethan's truck, and she looked up at the sky, which was doing what summer skies do when there are no clouds, going from black to almost black with a thickness of stars that you don't see from cities, the kind that reminds you the universe is very large and your problems are very specific, and both things are true at the same time. I want to ask you something, she said, still looking at the sky. Okay, he said. She looked at him. Do you regret it? Standing up in there? She nodded toward the diner. That day? Knowing how it turned out? That I took your job tip? That I ended up at Millbrook? That everything that followed? Do you regret any part of that? He thought about it. She could see him actually thinking about it, not reaching for the easy answer. No, he said. Not a single piece of it. Even the complicated part, she said? Even the fact that it's not simple now? That it's... She gestured vaguely at the space between them. Whatever this is. Especially those parts, he said. The simple version was nice. This is better. She looked at him. I'm not easy, she said. I want to be upfront about that. I have a demanding job that I care about intensely, and I'm still in the process of rebuilding things, and I've got a history that gets complicated when I talk about it. I'm not... She stopped. I'm not a simple proposition. I know, he said. And you're not simple either, she said. You've got Lily and your schedule and your whole life here that was built before I showed up. That's not nothing. No, he said. It's not. I'm just saying it out loud, she said, because I think things should be said out loud. I appreciate that, he said. He looked at her. I'm not looking for simple. I had simple for a while and it was fine, and then it ended and I survived. I'm looking for... He paused, searching for the right word. Something real, that's all. This is real, she said. Yeah, he said. I know. She took one step toward him. He was standing still, not moving to meet her and not moving away, just there, the way he was almost always just there, present and solid and not performing anything. She took another step. She was close enough now that she could see the specific way the diner light was catching the angle of his face, and she thought, 8 months. 8 months ago, you were a stranger in a work jacket who stood up without being asked and changed the angle of everything. She reached up and put a hand on his jaw, and he tilted his head very slightly into it, and she kissed him. Simple, real, the kind of kiss that isn't performing anything either. Not a movie kiss, not a grand gesture, just two people who had found each other by accident in a diner on Route 9 and had been finding their way to this particular moment ever since. When they pulled back, he was looking at her with an expression she had not seen on him before, softer than usual, the carefulness he kept around himself slightly lowered. That was a long time coming, he said. I know, she said. Worth the wait? She thought about it. Ask me in a year, she said. He laughed, real and unguarded, and she thought, there it is, there's the whole thing. This is what it looks like when it's right. Fair enough, he said. The year that followed was not a fairy tale. She would have been suspicious of it if it had been. The national rollout was grueling in the particular way that large institutional change is always grueling. Not dramatic, just relentless. The work of convincing facilities in 8 different states to adopt a framework they hadn't built and hadn't asked for, of rebuilding trust with Dave Kowalski every time the Harrisburg numbers dipped, and he sent her an email at 7 in the morning that was nominally about logistics and was actually about whether she was still paying attention. She was always paying attention. She told him so in writing, with data, every time. She hired 2 people for her team in the first quarter and a third in the second. She was a different kind of manager than she'd been at Hartbridge. Not worse, not better, just different in the ways that mattered. She did not confuse urgency for importance as often as she used to. She asked more questions and gave fewer speeches. She was wrong in meetings and said so in the same meeting rather than quietly correcting course later and hoping nobody noticed. Sandra Ellison told her in a quarterly review, "You're harder on yourself in public than you need to be." "I'd rather do it than have other people do it," Olivia said. "There's a version of that that's useful," Sandra said, "and a version of that that signals insecurity. Figure out which one you're doing and adjust." She thought about that for a long time afterward. Her apartment on Elm Street, with the mismatched tiles and the sliver of street visible from the bedroom window, she kept. She could have afforded something larger. She chose not to, partly for practical reasons, and partly because it was hers in a way that still mattered to her. Not as a reminder of how bad things had been, but as a reminder of what actually counted, what she needed to be functional and okay, which was less than she'd thought and different from what she'd expected. She paid off the last of the Heartbridge debt in February, 14 months after walking into Patty's Diner with $7.43 in her account. She made the final payment online from her kitchen table on a Tuesday morning before work. She did not celebrate this. She made a note of it, made her coffee, and went to work. On the bus, she looked out the window for a while and thought about what it had cost her to get there, and decided that the cost had been real and significant, and also that she would pay it again because the things it had bought her were things she would not have found any other way. She thought about Marcus Hale approximately once a month. She had trained herself down from daily by the simple practice of noticing when she started and choosing to stop, which was harder than it sounds and easier than therapy had made it seem when she'd started going in January. She had a therapist now, a woman named Dr. Reyes, who worked out of a small practice in the next town over and who had the particular talent of asking the question you hadn't thought to ask yourself. They worked through Heartbridge methodically, the way you work through a complicated site, carefully, with attention to the structure underneath, checking what was load-bearing and what was just debris. She did not hate Marcus. She had thought she would, and then found that she didn't, which confused her for a while until Dr. Reyes pointed out that what she actually felt was something closer to grief, for the partnership, for the years, for the version of herself that had trusted so completely and been so specifically wrong. Grief was harder to carry than anger in some ways. It was also more honest. She didn't have to forgive him. That was something Dr. Reyes said once clearly, and that Olivia kept. You don't have to forgive him to be finished with him. You just have to put him down. She was learning to put him down. Ethan's promotion came in the spring, 11 months after Olivia had started at the regional hub. He had been doing the work of a floor supervisor for a year without the title, and had finally said so plainly to the warehouse manager, which was characteristic of him. Not a campaign, not a political maneuver, just a statement of fact offered in the appropriate room to the appropriate person. The warehouse manager had agreed and taken it to Karen, who had agreed and taken it to the regional director, who had made it official by April. It came with a salary increase that meant Lily's after-school program was no longer a monthly calculation. It came with a schedule that was slightly more predictable, which in the context of being a single parent was not a small thing. It was actually a significant thing, and which he received with the particular contained relief of someone who has been managing around a problem for long enough that solving it still feels slightly surreal. He told Olivia on a Tuesday evening in her kitchen while she was making pasta and he was sitting at the counter with a beer and Lily was in the other room running a negotiation with the television about whether the show she wanted to watch was appropriate for 6-year-olds, which she conducted in the authoritative tones of someone who had clearly done research. They approved it, he said. She turned from the stove. The promotion? Effective May 1st. She looked at him. He was sitting there in his regular way, jacket off, slightly tired, the beer on the counter in front of him. And he was telling her a real thing that had happened, and she could see that it mattered to him in the quiet, specific way things mattered to Ethan, deep and not performed. Ethan, she said. It's a floor supervisor title, he said. I know it's not. Stop, she said. Don't qualify it. He looked at her. It's a real thing, she said. Let it be a real thing. He was quiet for a moment. She turned back to the pasta and heard him exhale, slow and even. Karen said the recommendation came partly from the operational framework data, he said. The numbers from my section specifically. She stirred the pot. The numbers were accurate, she said. You ran a good section. The framework made it visible, he said. Somebody had to build the framework. She looked over her shoulder at him. Somebody bought somebody lunch first. He almost smiled. That's a stretch. It's a long chain, she said, all connected. From the other room, Lily's negotiation with the television concluded, apparently in her favor, because the sound changed to something with a theme song. Ethan got up and went to check, came back and sat back down. She found a loophole, he said. The show is technically educational. Is it? It has a map segment, he said. She's claiming cartography. Olivia laughed. The pasta water boiled. She salted it and put in the pasta, and the kitchen was warm and smelled like garlic, and the ordinary evening moved around them in its ordinary way. They went back to the diner on a Saturday in late September, a year and 10 months after the first time. Olivia had suggested it without overthinking it, because she had gotten better at not overthinking, and Ethan had said yes without asking why, because he didn't need to ask. They sat in the same booth, the same window seat. The laminate was warm. Gloria was there because Gloria was always there on Saturdays, and she brought them coffee without being asked, and set down menus she knew they didn't need and said, "Back again," with the satisfaction of someone who has seen something she hoped she would see. They ordered. Ethan got the club sandwich. Olivia got the turkey on wheat. "You always get that," he said. "It's good," she said. "There are other things on the menu." "I like this one," she said. He shook his head, but he was smiling. They sat there in the booth, and she looked at the window. At Route 9 in the September afternoon, the light going gold, the way light goes in September when the summer has finally burned itself out and left something cleaner. And she thought about the woman who had sat here on a rainy November afternoon and pressed her hands flat on this table because the surface was warm and she had needed something warm to hold on to. She was still that woman. That was the thing people got wrong about change. They thought it replaced you, the old version, the struggling version. It didn't. You carried her forward. She was in there, the woman with $7.43 and a rain-dampened jacket, the woman who had lost a company and was learning to build a life from what was left. She was not gone. She was incorporated. She was the part of Olivia that would never walk into a room and not notice who looked like they were carrying more than they should, and would never be too busy to do the small thing. "What are you thinking about?" Ethan said. She looked at him. "That woman 2 tables over?" she said. "The one who's been looking at the menu for 10 minutes. He glanced over, casual. "What about her?" "She ordered a coffee and a glass of water, and she hasn't ordered food yet," Olivia said. "And she keeps looking at the prices." He looked at Olivia. She looked at him. "You want to take care of it?" he said. "Yeah," she said. He flagged Gloria down quietly. Olivia leaned in and said something to her, low enough that the woman 2 tables over couldn't hear. Gloria nodded. She went to the register. The woman 2 tables over got her meal. She didn't know who had done it. Gloria didn't tell her. She looked up once, slightly confused, and then she looked at her plate, and something in her shoulders dropped about half an inch. The specific release of someone who has been braced against something and can, just for this moment, stop bracing. Ethan watched this. Olivia watched him watching. "That's the thing," she said quietly. "What thing?" "The thing you did," she said. "In here. 8 months, but almost 2 years ago now. That's what it looked like from the outside." She paused. "I never knew what it looked like from the outside until right now." He looked at her. He didn't say anything. "It was exactly that," she said. "Just someone's shoulders going down." He looked at his coffee. His jaw moved slightly in the way it did when he was processing something that hit him somewhere real. "Olivia?" he said. "Yeah," she said. "I need you to know something," he said. "And I need you to let me say it without doing the thing where you redirect." She folded her hands on the table. "Okay." He looked up. "That day in November. I wasn't doing anything heroic. I was tired, and I was between shifts, and I had just gotten off a call with Lily's daycare about a scheduling issue, and I wasn't even thinking straight. I saw you, and I just—" He paused. "I just didn't want the thing that was happening to keep happening. That's all it was." "I know," she said. "But what happened after?" he said. "What you did with it. That's you, not me. I handed you a napkin. You built something." She looked at him. "We built something," she said. He held her gaze. "Yeah," he said. "We did." Gloria came by with the coffee pot, topped them both off, and moved on without interrupting. Outside, Route 9 went about its business in the September afternoon. A truck, a minivan, a woman walking a dog, the ordinary world doing what it does. Olivia looked out the window and then back at the man across from her. This man who had been, without knowing it, the hinge on which a year had turned, who had raised a daughter alone with the quiet determination of someone who had decided that doing the next right thing was enough of a philosophy to live by, who had stood up in a diner because someone looked like they needed someone to stand up and had not thought about it afterward until she made him. She reached across the table and put her hand over his. He turned his hand over and held it. The diner bell rang. Someone new came in. Gloria looked up and said from across the room, "Anywhere you like, hun. I'll be right with you." Olivia didn't look. She was looking at Ethan, at the particular ordinary face of a person she had not expected and had needed and had found in the same improbable moment, the way the best things tend to arrive, without warning, in the middle of something else entirely, when you were not ready and were also, it turned out, exactly ready. The coffee was hot. The light through the window was gold. It was enough. It was more than enough. It was everything.